Meet our latest chaotic anti-hero, just another 17-year-old outcast dragged across dimensions to play savior in a doomed reality. Plucked into the heavens, he meets a divine beauty who dumps the standard exposition and hands out legendary blessings. Soon after, his entire class descends into a seemingly peaceful kingdom. However, reality suddenly fractures, and he gets ripped right back to the baffled deity. Bound by celestial law, she is forced to bestow yet another divine gift upon his soul. Unbelievably, this insane cycle repeats roughly 10 times. Each reset grants him another reality-shattering ability. Just as the endless loop grows agonizing, destiny finally anchors him to a single timeline. Yet, society brands him as utter garbage. Or so the ignorant masses assume. He perfectly cloaked his overwhelming power, burying his god-tier skills deep in the shadows. But this so-called holy empire was actually a deadly slaughterhouse. The royals secretly plotted to execute the summoned champions. Enter his stunning but lethal blonde combat master. Takafuji had to play a brilliant psychological game, carefully balancing on the edge of survival to evade execution without revealing his true monstrous strength. A quick warning: his eventual clash with that golden-haired warrior is a breathtaking masterpiece of combat. Enough foreshadowing. Let the tragedy begin. A crimson-eyed maiden steps forward as a voice echoes the name, Leori. Trembling fingers gently caress the bewildered boy's cheek. Before he can even question her identity, crimson sprays across the void. The fatal strike lands flawlessly. The bloody blade clatters away as she plummets into an endless abyss. Gasping for air, he questions if the agonizing blade and her sorrowful tears were real, or how she whispered his true name. Suddenly, his eyes snap open in a mundane classroom, clutching a comic book. Meet our 17-year-old lead, Takafuji Leori. His mind spins in absolute chaos, desperately trying to comprehend that vivid nightmare. Yet, everything around him radiates boring high school normalcy. The afternoon drags on, exactly as it always had. Instantly, an ancient arcane formation swallows the room, detonating into a blinding storm of violent violet aura. Students instinctively shield their eyes, while Takafuji collapses to his knees against cold stone, completely paralyzed by the unknown. He glances around, discovering his peers trapped alongside him in a terrifying new reality. Hysteria breaks out as terrified teenagers scream for answers, desperate to escape. Right then, a radiant celestial being descends from the heavens, commanding the terrified crowd to silence. She declares they now stand within the ethereal corridor of souls, bridging dimensional realms, and reveals her divine identity as a literal goddess. Fate had selected them all, dragging them across the cosmos to rise as champions against a supreme Dark Lord. It sounds like a tired legend, but reality is about to shatter their sanity. The bewildered boys stare blankly into the light, completely lost on what this crusade entails. The Heavenly Maiden decrees their destination is the realm of Burge, landing directly within the mighty Heian Empire. The clueless students remain, frozen in absolute disbelief, struggling to process the divine revelation. Meanwhile, Takafuji analyzes the situation, realizing this perfectly mirrors the plot of cheap fantasy novels. Undeterred by their silence, the celestial guide announces their imminent departure from this spiritual gateway straight into the warring continent. Yet, before they cross the astral boundary, a blessing must be bestowed. Raising a glowing palm over the trembling youths, she channels pure ethereal energy, awakening a unique transcendent power within each soul. She issues a solemn warning to resist the intoxicating temptation of absolute authority and guide humanity towards salvation. Whispering a final prayer for their survival, reality warps as the scene transitions to a grand fortress. Takafuji's vision clears, revealing an opulent stone chamber filled with his disoriented classmates. An exhausted, weary maiden weakly declares the forbidden summoning ritual a total triumph. The surrounding elders erupt into joyous cheers, praising the heavens that the holy priestess delivered a miracle. They naively proclaim that an era of absolute peace is finally at hand. A commanding voice suddenly shatters the commotion, demanding immediate silence. A regal figure rises from his throne, expressing profound gratitude for their dimensional descent. Introducing himself as Lassen, the supreme sovereign of Heian, the monarch surprisingly falls to his knees. The entire royal court bows, desperately pleading for the demonic sovereign's head. Takafuji silently observes that their arrival grants them highest-tier aristocratic respect. Breaking the heavy atmosphere, a bespectacled student nervously steps up, begging the mighty emperor to stand. He hesitantly stammers out the golden question on everyone's mind. Exists there any method to warp back to their mundane existence? A gentle figure steps into the light to address their anxieties. The weary maiden reveals herself as Saint Aya, confirming that a dimensional return is completely possible. But a cruel catch remains. They must wait exactly 30 days for the celestial alignment of the grand lunar cycle. Therefore, any soul too terrified to cross blades with the demonic hordes was welcome to shelter safely within the impenetrable royal.or citadel until the gateway reopened. Our sharp-minded lead scoffs internally, feeling like this desperate crusade is being framed as a harmless month-long vacation. The anxious schoolgirls whisper among themselves, terrified of missing weeks of modern life. Yet, the holy maiden swiftly calms their fears, explaining that temporal laws prevent time from flowing in their homeworld, ensuring they return to the exact second they vanished. Takafuji immediately narrows his eyes, sensing a massive deception buried in this flawlessly convenient setup. A chilling instinct warns him. The priestess then asks the trembling heroes who chooses the cowardly path home, promising that no royal guard will bar their exit. Hesitation chokes the air as the frightened teenagers clearly want to flee, but she drops to her knees, tearfully begging them to rescue her dying world. Takafuji remains deadpan, predicting that according to typical storytelling rules, usually, a hot-blooded protagonist volunteers to fight the demon lord. But here, dead silence. Clearly, this batch lacks a chosen savior. The bespectacled student nervously speaks up, sensing the heavy atmosphere, pleading for more time to decide. The monarch sits in absolute silence, while our protagonist notes the surprising calm in the room. A royal advisor declares a 1-month grace period to either head, home, or forge a hero's contract. Tonight is meant for feasting and revelry. Thrilled, our guy expresses his gratitude and rushes straight to the banquet. Savoring otherworldly cuisine is the ultimate treat. He's eager to uncover the culinary secrets of this magical realm. But without warning, the exact same summoning array flares up right under him. He figures the imperial sorcerers are just showing off their overwhelming mastery over spatial magic. He is absolutely pumped to dive deep into this mystical dimension. Yet, a classmate suddenly screams his name. Panic erupts as he alone stands trapped in the glowing runes. Before his mind can even register the shift, he is violently dragged back to the divine realm, the legendary crossroads of reincarnation. The golden-haired maiden materializes, looking completely bewildered. He casually welcomes her back, but she stammers, asking, "Didn't he just leave?" He simply nods. The divine guide is utterly baffled by this unprecedented glitch. He asks if another forced transit is underway, and she helplessly agrees. The catch is, absolute law demands every visitor must be granted a blessing. So, she rests her palm over his crown once more. She prays for his safety, while our protagonist grumbles about this chaotic magical ping-pong game. Amidst the blinding warp, he notes the previous array was deep violet, while this one burns golden with unknown runes. Suddenly, he awakens bound and gagged to a cold metal chair. Analysis time is over. A decrepit figure creeps near, croaking that their forbidden ritual actually worked. A shadowy assistant sneers, dubbing our hero as mere specimen number 12. The elder leans in, obsessing over the lethal potential of his mystic vision. Reduced to a mere lab rat, Takafuji is absolutely furious. These multi-dimensional transports are turning out to be deadly traps far beyond what he ever anticipated. The maniacal duo grin wickedly, eager to begin their twisted dissection. It is glaringly clear he has landed in a madman's horrific laboratory. The butcher advances with a gleaming blade, hissing that it is finally time to harvest the secrets of his ocular power. The deranged scholar quotes ancient texts, claiming that souls dragged across dimensions awaken god-tier ocular abilities upon entry. He intends to carve the truth out of him. Takafuji instantly deduces that these coveted mystic eyes are the divine blessings bestowed by the saintess herself. The sinister researcher extends a cursed palm, warning that a violent struggle would damage the precious merchandise. Therefore, a mind-shattering hypnosis will be applied. Briefly alarmed, Takafuji quickly regains his composure, silently observing the intricate spell formation unfold. The old fool gasps in horror as his mental domination shatters against an invisible wall, achieving absolutely nothing. This was supposed to be the pinnacle of mind control sorcery. Takafuji scoffs internally, mocking their pathetic excuse for high-tier arts. Suddenly, The frantic assistant shouts for the lead surgeon. Staring into Takafuji's soul, his left iris radiates the dominion of time, while his right pupil burns with absolute truth. The fanatic shrieks in pure ecstasy, declaring that wielding dual supreme visions is an impossible miracle. Without hesitation, they brandish their terrifying surgical instruments, roaring to commence the brutal harvest immediately. Yet, Takafuji is keenly aware that enduring this dissection fully conscious means unimaginable agony. He refuses to become a slaughterhouse victim, desperately channeling his newfound ocular power for a miraculous escape. Boom! Another blinding teleportation array ignites beneath him. The butchers freeze in sheer disbelief, but we all recognize this familiar rescue. Instantly, he crashes back into the divine sanctuary, facing a profoundly dumbfounded saintess. She stammers that this makes encounter number 3, playfully asking if he is just utterly obsessed with her. He bluntly replies, "It is destiny's fault." He demands if the deity possesses any clue about this cosmic glitch. She stutters helplessly, confessing that throughout eternity, such a looping phenomenon has never occurred and requires immediate divine investigation. Takafuji smirks, realizing his transit history is so chaotic. He is now exchanging casual banter with a heavenly being. Yet, before a single truth drops, he is violently yanked away, manifesting before a haughty aristocratic maiden. An elven attendant gasps in awe, praising her master's unprecedented luck in conjuring a rare humanoid beast on her maiden voyage. Unsurprisingly, Takafuji despises the monster label. Stripped of his humanity, he is treated as a mere subservient beast facing an absolute slave pact. But suddenly, the mystical runes ignite again. He reappears in the starry realm, flashing an exhausted grin. The saintess groans, asking if this loop tires him. Our protagonist simply wishes to finally grasp the truth behind this endless summoning loop. Time was running out, so she hurriedly pitched a desperate theory, keeping her explanation incredibly brief. Dimensional travel across the void demanded an overwhelmingly powerful soul to act as an anchor, ensuring safe passage between worlds. And this mere mortal possessed an exceptionally rare, titanic spiritual presence. However, our main character, Takafuji, scoffed, claiming he was no righteous saint or noble hero, making this supposed pure spirit completely illogical. She quickly clarified, it was never about moral purity, but sheer, unadulterated power. His raging soul desperately needed to anchor itself permanently in one specific realm, to forge a heroic pact and shatter the cycle. Suddenly, reality warped, transitioning to a grand fortress where a mystical maiden, clutching a glowing artifact, declared his newly awakened power to devour other skills. Her breathtaking beauty left him completely mesmerized, and in this 4th consecutive summoning, fate granted another divine blessing. He sprinted eagerly to seal their eternal contract. But just as the binding ritual began, the spatial portal swallowed him once more. For his 5th manifestation, dark sorcery violently dragged him away. The shadowy summoner collapsed in tattered robes, drenched in sweat, while our boy casually manifested completely unharmed atop a towering, ominous citadel on Mount Pico. By his 6th chaotic transfer, he awakened as the reincarnated sovereign of despair, surrounded by hordes of cheering, monstrous legions. Yet, drifting back into the celestial void, the heavenly entity marveled at his terrifyingly stacked arsenal of passive skills. He stood utterly amazed. She solemnly vowed that the approaching jump would definitely be his final destination. Therefore, she began fusing his countless divine gifts together into one core. Once his feet touched solid ground again, she instructed him to verify his ultimate system interface, likely visible through his cursed right eye. Within a majestic throne room, a regal figure welcomed the champion. He calmly blinked, thinking, "Here we go, again." But shockingly, he was not alone in this chamber. Beside him stood a high schooler named Ryu Shinsaki, standing alongside a girl called Tamaki Kurosawa. She desperately shouted for her classmates, revealing one last student, Eli Isagi. In that tense heartbeat, a regal figure spoke from the golden throne. The monarch proclaimed them as the prophesied saviors. Our overpowered protagonist quickly realized these teenagers shared a prior bond, leaving him as the sole outcast. Utter confusion erupted over why a random stranger crashed their hero party. They glanced at the sovereign, who arrogantly assumed the trio held true power, while our boy was merely collateral damage. The other students nodded in absolute agreement, leaving the baffled ruler loudly muttering about this entirely unprecedented summoning glitch. Suddenly, an elegant maiden gracefully descended the stairs, questioning if they were the otherworldly champions. She proudly declared herself the first princess, boldly claiming absolute credit for the sacred ritual, and demanding their utter gratitude. Takafuji instantly recognized her as an insufferably arrogant, pampered royal archetype. The haughty noblewoman then dropped the heavy lore, revealing they had entered the legendary Empire of the Dawning Sun, a perilous realm shared by mankind, beastkin, and bloodthirsty fiends. Naturally, these sinister fiends served as the ultimate adversaries, commanded by the Sovereign of Shadows. That demonic tyrant truly seemed like an apocalyptic threat. Take heed, young mortals. This relentless nightmare forced humanity's fractured nations into a desperate alliance to magically conjure celestial saviors. Yet, this divine spell required supreme royal bloodlines, and predictably, she paraded herself as the destined chosen caster. Now, every human territory bore the heavy burden of forging these chosen ones into absolute demon-slaying weapons. She smirked, assuming they grasped the absolute genius of this grand strategy. However, Takafuji saw right through the illusion. Their brilliant tactic merely involved dragging innocent souls here and praying someone would violently fix this doomed world. The royal heiress commanded them to ascend in supreme power as the absolute vanguard of her empire and obliterate the vile shadow monarch. Piercing the heavy tension, Tamaki finally voiced the most crucial question. By what magical means could they journey back to Earth? The princess coldly shattered their hopes, declaring it an absolute impossibility. Instead, they should bow, in deep reverence as the exalted champions of the sun, praising the high heavens for this glorious fate. Internally, our boy boiled with violent fury, cursing these arrogant aristocrats who severely lacked the polite hospitality of the Hygen realm. The pompous emperor then ordered the youths to touch the destiny stone and unveil their latent heroic blessings. The ancient monolith was ceremoniously revealed, and the exact moment Ryu grasped it, he awakened the unstoppable limit break skill. Eli Isaji unlocked the impenetrable magical Aegis barrier, while Kurosawa obtained supreme mana affinity. Yet, our silent observer Takafuji merely received a basic radar sense. Though, he technically gained a system perk, its underwhelming nature barely registered as a true combat threat. Following the magical appraisal, the Imperial scholars rigorously tested their physical limits and mana capacities. Ryu immediately displayed god-tier superhuman martial prowess. Eli possessed terrifying innate potential for barrier arts and colossal mana reserves. Simultaneously, Tamaki showcased devastating magical aptitude, specializing purely in catastrophic elemental destruction. But tragically, Takafuji held absolutely zero talent for magical manipulation whatsoever. The crushing realization hit him hard. He survived countless dimensions just to rank beneath these schoolgirls, fueling his bitter frustration. Collapsing in sheer physical exhaustion, he grumbled that his weakness changed absolutely nothing, since those teenagers were clearly the true prophesied saviors. Anyway, under the pale moonlight, the group secretly converged in Ryu's quarters to strategize. Takafuji scanned the shadows, questioning why Ryu's room eclipsed his own realm completely. Meanwhile, the two heroines harshly questioned his very presence, doubting his worthiness as a true savior. Those sharp words pierced his pride, yet our protagonist swallowed his response in silence. Tamaki quickly deflected, claiming she held zero concern for his fate. But our main character saw through her facade, sensing her genuine fear of him stepping into deadly crossfire. She was a classic tsundere, burying her true emotions. Ryu boldly stepped in, declaring his rare sensory skills might become their ultimate trump card. Takafuji observed that every single one of his companions harbored conflicting views on his worth. Ryu confidently added that despite our boy's frail power, Oe could simply cast an impenetrable arcane shield to protect him. She reluctantly nodded, accepting the burden if he truly desired it. Our hero silently marveled at how a girl so remarkably stoic could possess such overwhelming charm. He paused, suddenly struck by the sheer beauty radiating from all three of his otherworldly companions. He was blessed by the heavens. Tamaki's voice trembled slightly as she questioned the safety of lingering within this foreign kingdom's borders. Ryu opened his prided mouth to reply, only to be interrupted by a loud remark praising the kingdom's supposedly generous hospitality and lavish treatment. Everyone instantly turned toward our protagonist, whose desperate hand gestures demanded absolute silence. Upon his weathered notebook, he quickly scribbled a chilling warning. Unseen shadows were eavesdropping on their every word, making any reckless talk a deadly mistake. The trio froze in sheer disbelief, completely dumbfounded by the terrifying revelation, while he silently rejoiced that his heavily mocked sensory blessing was already saving their lives. Even though he completely lacked any combat prowess or magical affinity, this divine radar was an absolute game-changer. He could pinpoint the hidden auras of lurking enemies or monstrous beasts through solid stone. Right now, his mind pictured the exact spies creeping just beyond their door. Back when he occupied his private chambers, he endlessly chased away the lingering maids, yet they stubbornly returned like ghosts. He furiously scribbled a new command, begging Oe to weave a silencing ward. With nothing to lose, she unleashed a mystical incantation. An ethereal mana ring expanded, though she nervously cautioned that its fragile energy would shatter before long. Ryu showered her with glowing compliments, praising her absolute brilliance, leaving her blushing and utterly flustered. Meanwhile, Takafuji clenched his teeth, realizing these oblivious fools were sparking a romance rite amidst a crisis. Suddenly, Tamaki's sharp voice demanded to understand why this kingdom dared to monitor their private words from the shadows. Ryu coldly stated the brutal truth. After all, these newly summoned champions wielded catastrophic power, capable of annihilating entire empires. Thus, leaving such walking weapons unmonitored was absolute madness. Yet she fiercely snapped back, arguing the utter absurdity of spying on saviors they had kidnapped against their will. That was the moment Takafuji grimly revealed that this entire nation reeked of absolute desperation. While ignorant of this realm's economic laws, his instinct screamed that a devastating financial ruin was suffocating the kingdom. The ultimate proof was the king desperately micromanaging mundane royal duties, a deeply unnatural sight. Furthermore, the sovereign commanded shockingly few royal guards for such a colossal fortress. Tamaki chimed in, having sensed the same eerie emptiness. Still, she praised the incredibly divine banquet meals, bursting with exotic spices. Takafuji, however, stared blankly at his plate, finding zero joy in the foreign feast and questioned if his taste buds had been cursed. His comrades bitterly muttered that their designated quarters felt far more like a rugged, mercenary barrack than a glorious hero's sanctuary. Our protagonist scoffed internally, knowing they would faint if they saw his miserable, closet-sized cell. Given their lack of prior otherworldly summoning experiences, they remained blissfully ignorant, without a baseline for comparison. Yet his memories of arriving in Hyjin burned vividly in his mind. Staring intensely, he warned his three allies to secretly forge a desperate escape strategy from this treacherous kingdom, utilizing his absolute sensory radar to blindside all royal surveillance. Meanwhile, they desperately needed to unlock the hidden mystery of warping back to their home dimension and escaping this golden cage. Since this fragile empire viewed his three comrades as their ultimate salvation, those desperate royals would never voluntarily release their living weapons. Furthermore, despite the royal princess swearing upon her honor that escaping was impossible, it reeked of dark deception, masking a terrifying secret she dared not speak. Ryu solemnly nodded, fully aligning his unwavering trust with our hero. Their fatal flaw was their sheer powerlessness and lack of worldly knowledge. Therefore, they needed to vanish into the shadows and observe enemies for a time. Without warning, Tamaki invaded our protagonist's space. Her gaze locked onto his glowing golden pupil, demanding answers about the bizarre mutation. Panic-stricken, our boy shielded his face, sweating as he remembered his glaring anomaly. After all, an ordinary Japanese student possessing a demonic golden stare was practically unheard of. However, Ryu coolly intervened, declaring that every warrior harbors deep secrets best left buried in the dark. Thus, he ordered them to stop interrogating their comrade over petty mysteries. He dismissed it as a fleeting teenage delusion, a rebellious phase destined to fade with time. For this critical moment, they simply had to look the other way. Our hero internally sweat-dropped, realizing Ryu assumed he wore a flashy cosmetic lens to mimic an edgy, main character. But honestly, that absurd misunderstanding was the perfect cover. Playing along, he commanded them to witness the legendary curse of his mystic eye. Hours later, sealed within his solitary chamber, he deeply pondered the sinister truth behind his cursed vision. Summoning his status window, He gasped as an absolutely massive wall of bizarre attributes bombarded his sight. The terrifying hurdle remained. Utterly clueless about this dimension's power scaling, he remained completely blind into his true standing on the strength hierarchy. However, recalling his utterly pathetic physical trial results, a sinking dread warned him of a catastrophic weakness. Determined, he boldly inspected his hidden arsenal. A horrifying truth emerged. Each pupil housed god-tier powers, the dark arts of a demon lord, an omnipotent ability to plunder enemy skills, and an absolute sensory domain. His jaw dropped, discovering foreign traits, fused into his soul the moment he was dragged into this world as an absolute beast. Born into the demonic bloodline, he awakened as a formidable vampire baron, but he carried a cursed penalty, the hatred of the sun god. Whenever daylight struck, his raw power plummeted to 1/10, sealing away his magical arsenal. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces connected perfectly. His humiliating struggle during the trials was strictly due to the blazing sun, and his meals tasted like absolute poison thanks to the hidden garlic. Even worse, whenever his gaze fell upon those beautiful girls, a dark, primal urge awakened to sink his fangs into their delicate necks and devour their sweet, crimson life force. He had been so utterly consumed by his sensory skills that he entirely neglected the terrifying awakening inside his own flesh. Bizarre ocular powers, cursed vampiric instincts, and a whirlwind of monstrous genetic mutations. He was morphing into something utterly unrecognizable. Yet, piece by agonizing piece, his fragmented memories completely flooded back. Analyzing his fateful arrival and taking inventory of his new powers, the truth revealed his sensory aura practically guarantees no enemy can ambush him from the shadows. Snatching up a rusted dining utensil, he activates a devastating transmutation skill, draining its core essence to forge a lethal armament. Instantly, the mundane iron warps into a perfectly balanced, deadly blade. His crimson eyes held absolute mastery. Motion tracking, flawless scaling, infinite range, atomic focus, dark vision, future sight, mind-warping illusions, absolute penetration, flawless memory, and tracking killing intent. What a terrifying skill tree. He realizes this terrifying arsenal revolves entirely around his vision, like an ultimate divine ocular system. However, the single mystery remaining was the golden pupil. The system dictated that any spell formation witnessed by this specific iris would permanently imprint into his soul, ready to be unleashed instantly. Realizing its potential, he vows to conquer this realm's arcane secrets at the very first opportunity. The real dilemma, though, lies in decoding this massive, cryptic ledger of overpowered abilities. Thankfully, mastering his newfound dark vampiric lineage seems incredibly straightforward. Drain a victim dry until their soul shatters, and they rise as a mindless ghoul. But if the prey is pure and untouched, they are reborn as his loyal, noble-blooded kin upon tasting his bite. Otherwise, they just rot as regular undead fodder. Furthermore, he could slaughter an enemy, bestow a single drop of his cursed essence, and resurrect them as an eternal slave. The most terrifying perk? Draining a target completely allows him to devour their life's memories and instantly plunder their combat skills. Assuming he unleashes his legendary potential under the moonlight, ascending to ultimate supremacy is guaranteed. But right now, his prime objective is mastering this unfamiliar vessel and surviving this unforgiving realm. Fast forward to daylight, where beneath the agonizing sun, a striking warrior reveals herself as the Knight Commander of the Radiant Dawn. This imposing blonde champion goes by Ayana. Our cynical protagonist scoffs internally, completely utterly baffled by the sheer audacity of encountering a female military absolute leader in this brutal era. Perhaps it's just standard isekai logic, or desperately tied to the kingdom's crumbling war budget. The formidable commander then turns her piercing gaze toward the female companions, acknowledging their blazing, magical potential, yet sternly demanding they master basic close combat arts. Under normal circumstances, grueling physical conditioning would be step 1, but she deems their innate power sufficient. Our demonic lord, conversely, is dreading this exact moment. Right now, his weakened attributes are pathetically laughable. Meanwhile, Ryu casually rocks 1500 attack power with baseline stats shattering the 1000 mark. Tamaki dominates his vitality, boasting 3500 intuition. Elway trails slightly in senses but brutally dominates in every other combat metric. The sheer numbers of this heroic trio had already shattered human limitations from the very second they spawned. Commander Ayana firmly orders the gifted girls to select their perfect weapon paths before diving into fundamental combat stances. However, our cursed underdog receives a drastically different, utterly hellish fate. She relentlessly declares that rebuilding his fragile physical foundation is priority number one. The sheer agony? He is literally pumping iron beneath the blazing sun, completely obliterating his suppressed demon attributes. Not only is his divine strength utterly sealed, but he's battling mind-shattering migraines. Ayana fiercely vows to personally forge him into a warrior, demanding his absolute conviction. Sadly, our tortured hero is already fading into unconsciousness, with zero chance of escaping this boot camp. Out of nowhere, that unbearably arrogant royal princess dramatically requests clearance to invade the training grounds with her royal entourage. A massive headache for Takafuji. However, this spoiled royal wasn't marching alone. Shadowing, her steps were imposing figures. Judging by the intimate proximity of the lady flanking the princess, she clearly wielded phenomenal political authority. A breathtakingly gorgeous noblewoman, yet her freezing gaze resembled a lifeless porcelain doll masking a venomous smile. The commander immediately saluted the royal sisters, questioning their sudden intrusion. Takafuji instantly ditched his torturous workout, leaning back in complete relief, eagerly watching the unfolding drama. The mysterious doll lady offered a graceful bow, while the obnoxiously arrogant first princess smugly declared she had paused her elite royal duties just to grace them with her presence, demanding total worship. Our demonic lord inwardly mocked her pathetic ego, until the chilling beauty claimed the spotlight. Revealing herself as the second princess, she formally expressed absolute delight at crossing paths with him this fateful afternoon. Her true goal? An exclusive private interrogation. The scene abruptly cuts to a dimly lit royal chamber. Standing before a tactical chalkboard, she coldly mandated their upcoming private tutoring sessions. Yet, his survival instincts screamed danger at this suspiciously isolated curriculum. The other summoned champions were enjoying standard lectures, so why was he, while the arrogant first princess remained isolated elsewhere? The bitter reality? That haughty royal flatly refused to tutor a mere commoner over a chosen hero. To her, his existence was an utter insult. He brushed it off, but silently vowed that one day he would make her deeply regret that pride. The second princess stepped up to commence the lecture, but our protagonist needed to uncover some truths first. He questioned the royal hierarchy, wondering if the eldest sister was truly older, considering her title as the second royal heir. Her reply revealed a tangled web of succession, ultimately confessing that the haughty first princess was the absolute rightful successor. Takafuji instantly recognized the toxic political battlefield ahead. Naturally, he wanted absolutely nothing to do with such a dangerous power struggle. As the lecture continued, a massive revelation dropped. The kingdom of the rising sun was built by the legendary savior who slaughtered the former demon king. Astonishingly, that champion was a spellcaster, meaning the supreme founder of this entire realm was actually a powerful witch. This explained the deep fanaticism pulsing through the nation. Because of this, only female heirs could inherit the crown. Matriarchs selected their royal husbands, granting those men the power to rule as mere regents. Yet, if the absolute queen ever demanded an annulment, his glorious reign instantly shattered. Through his gentle tutor, he absorbed the continent's bloody history and core mysteries of mana. Exhaustion finally won, dragging him into deep slumber. But under the moonlight, he awoke to relentlessly study arcane arts, preparing for tomorrow's brutal practical exam. Thankfully, he had secured a rare spellbook from the second princess beforehand. He sensed her hidden disdain when he had dozed off during her precious lecture, and her silent annoyance when he requested the sacred text. Yet, maintaining her perfect porcelain doll facade, she flashed a flawless smile. Staring down at the glowing pentagram, he knew it was time to conquer last night's frustrating failure. Channeling his energy, he awakened the true mystic eye to analyze the complex magical formation. In concept, this divine gaze should permanently brand the spell into his retina for instant casting. The brutal reality? Absolutely nothing was triggering. Doubt crept in as the mystic vision remained utterly dormant. He desperately scanned other mystical arrays, but just as he feared, the results were completely hollow. This grand magical experiment was a devastating bust. Suddenly, he remembered his evolved 2.0 vision. Grabbing some blank parchment, he fiercely began sketching the runes. This enhanced ocular power was so absolute, it allowed him to flawlessly reconstruct every single spell formation witnessed from his past lives. Logically, this divine recall should have been completely blocked by the ancient wizard's mind wipes. But this supreme eye defied all logic. He traced the complex magical geometry with terrifying fluidity. Glaring down at his masterpiece, a surging, pulsating aura erupted directly from his pupil. An overwhelming sensation washed over him. Perhaps he had finally unlocked this godlike potential. Thrilled to verify his newfound power, he chimed the servant's bell. A graceful maid stepped inside, questioning if she was needed, and our protagonist smoothly requested a tiny favor. Before she could even blink, his pupil flared as he unleashed the ancient master's supreme mind control. Instantly, her bright gaze shattered into a dull, soulless void. Brushing his fingers across her cheek, he realized the absolute subjugation was a total success. Pushing the limits, he boldly questioned her about her undergarments. She robotically replied, "Black." He cursed his own stupidity for asking. Didn't he literally possess penetrating X-ray sight? Analyzing the chaotic events that had unfolded, a theory struck him. Perhaps his spell-thieving skill only preserved arcane arrays, originating from the exact dimension where he acquired the power. If this harsh limitation held true, his singular ultimate weapon would strictly be elite mental domination. It was a bleak possibility, yet the mystery remained unsolved. During his previous brutal isekai summons, he had memorized countless magical blueprints. Through pure willpower, perhaps, he could manifest those forgotten arts. Channeling his absolute focus, he visualized a past rune and violently forged the spell into reality. Rather than violently shifting dimensions, space warped, instantly blinking him into the dense woods nearby. It became brutally clear he could weaponize this as an elite spatial warp, perfectly fusing his crimson pupil's sniper-like sight with the golden eye's dimensional gateway. With this godly combo, the fortress walls were basically meaningless. Out here in the wild, completely hidden from prying eyes, he began to safely unleash his remaining arsenal. Pressing his palm against stone, he summoned a sinister, abyssal array. Through this dark art, he could absolutely dominate lifeless matter, manipulating them flawlessly and sealing them within his own shadow. Yet, items dominated by this hex lost physical connection to the mortal plane. But the second he canceled his dark grip, reality restored their normal state. Although this trick was incredibly deadly, it carried severe restrictions. More importantly, this abyssal affinity granted him the legendary Shadow Step. This phantom skill let him sink into solid surfaces and instantly erupt nearby. Phasing inside a slender tree, the sensation felt utterly bizarre. It felt like standing inside an infinite void. Eager for more, he activated his ultimate creation skill once again. A nearby boulder began to violently melt and reshape, forging into a flawless, lethal blade. Narrowing his gaze, he replayed the devastating combat choreography his vision had stolen from the elite commander. A single glance permanently copied the techniques, allowing him to flawlessly unleash those bone-shattering strikes. Since the midnight shadows cloaked him, he furiously drilled his new arts, knowing dawn would bring absolute exhaustion. Hours melted away until his body was entirely shattered, yet his aura crackled with undeniable growth. Suddenly, a glowing system prompt materialized out of nowhere, announcing that he had achieving level 1 swordsmanship. This huge breakthrough unlocked his dormant abilities. Now, his ultimate goal was figuring out exactly how to ascend in power. Activating sensory detection, a sinister presence flared. Peering through the dense foliage, a terrifying, rabbit-like monstrosity emerged, clutching prey in its bloody jaws. It resembled a bird, yet was bizarrely covered in thick fur. Firing up his identification skill, the system revealed a demonic bird gecko. However, its terrifying status window immediately confirmed that this vile beast possessed overwhelming combat power. Sudden memories surfaced of castle guards gossiping wildly about how the legendary feathers of this beast were highly prized materials. This sparked a burning question. How did those fragile humans hunt? Such nightmares? Venturing deeper into the shadowy woods, he encountered slightly weaker beasts. Yet, even their most pathetic base stat sat at 600, easily eclipsing his own strength. Without a doubt, he was trapped inside an elite monster territory, sparking a massive crisis. Relying on his current combat power, a solitary duel was winnable. The true nightmare was the extremely high probability of overwhelming enemy ambushes. Meanwhile, behind the majestic castle walls, the breathtakingly gorgeous Commander Ayana strutted down the grand corridors, urgently calling out for Her Royal Highness. Kneeling before the second princess, she confirmed the perimeter's absolute security, yet warned against roaming the shadows unescorted. Disregarding the warning, the royal heir demanded a private audience. Leaning in, she piercingly questioned the rumors about Takafuji being denied sacred artifacts during his training. The fierce commander firmly clarified that absolutely none of the summoned champions were wielding those divine weapons yet. Unrelenting, the princess demanded answers, boldly arguing that destiny would inevitably force them to harness that ultimate power. Ayana averted her gaze, solemnly explaining that while divine relics violently amplify raw strength, the inexperienced heroes lack true readiness. Without forging an unbreakable body and mind, the champions would suffer a fatal dependency. That was why her tactical approach involved relentless observation and grinding their foundational limits first. The young royal cast down her eyes, flashing a sharp smile, murmuring she was foolish to doubt humanity's invincible warrior. A heavy, suffocating silence gripped the veteran commander, before whispering that the princess's once radiant smile had grown completely cold. Turning away, the royal dismissed the bold observation, claiming she was entirely oblivious to such changes. Probing deeper, Ayana requested the second princess's true thoughts regarding her older sister. The royal coolly replied that her sister was extremely gifted and dangerous. Yet, the sharp commander boldly challenged that lie. Suddenly, the princess chillingly warned that while these halls repelled physical threats, they were absolutely swarming with treacherous rats eagerly listening from the shadows. Offering a cryptic goodnight, she vanished. Left alone, the commander stood paralyzed, haunted by the realization that Princess Aaliyah possessed an extremely guarded nature, yet feared the wrong enemies entirely. Several grueling days blurred past, and our underdog finally adapted. Unsurprisingly, the other chosen champions experienced explosive growth, leaving him completely in the dust regarding raw physical enhancement. Right from dawn, Ryu transformed into a natural blade master, relentlessly carving out his destiny on the path of an elite swordsman. Meanwhile, Tamaki boldly grasped a mystical staff, unleashing a highly unorthodox magical style. She viciously bombarded the earth with destructive spells, swinging her wand like a colossal warhammer, completely shattering any logical magical theory. Concurrently, Elway mastered the deadly arts of archery. While traditional, snipers required heavy vanguard protection, her impenetrable defensive barrier rendered her an unstoppable fortress. This lethal trinity boasted Ryu, the overwhelmingly dominant close-quarters vanguard. Then came Tamaki, an explosive powerhouse annihilating enemies at any range. And finally Elway, manifesting as a perfectly self-sustaining sniper actively shielding her entire squad. In crushing contrast, our isolated protagonist spent the past 3 days just barely grasping the bare minimum basics of his brutal training. It became glaringly obvious his instructors only cared to teach him lethal, ranged weapon tossing. They drilled him relentlessly in shadow walking and expertly dismantling deadly dungeon traps. Their hidden agenda was crystal clear. They desperately sought to forge him into a disposable scout, exploiting his overpowered sensory detection. Yet, whenever darkness fell, he'd stealthily retreat into the monster-infested woods to awaken his true potential. Right now, he ruthlessly drilled his telekinetic mastery over remote weaponry. Guiding the blade's deadly trajectory, he severed the mana link at the exact microsecond, burying the steel deep into ancient bark. Still, glaring up at the crimson moon, a blazing fury regarding his miserable sunlight curse consumed his soul. Would an explosive level-up finally shatter this cursed shackle? For now, his only salvation lay in grinding his forbidden skills to absolute perfection. Suddenly, the demonic bird stood drooling, ready to devour its prey, when a terrifying shadow blitzed forward. It was Takafuji, accelerating at breakneck speeds. His boots practically defied gravity as he soared above the earth. Fusing his chaotic dark mana with supreme telekinesis, he manifested an invisible net to paralyze his prey. Executing this flawless combo, he instantly closed the gap, locked gazes, and unleashed his dominating hypnosis. The horrified beast paralyzed instantly, granting a flawless opening without a single drop of danger. Delivering the finishing blow, he hoisted the creature using shadow magic, sealing it into his spatial inventory. Insanely, he seamlessly entered his own dimensional void entirely unbothered. Driven by his newly awakened vampiric instincts, his next move was savage. Hidden in absolute secrecy, he ravenously chugged the monster's vital essence. Wiping his fangs, he vanished, tracking his next target. Yet, this grotesque female beast promised a genuinely foul flavor. Sadly, beggars can't choice, so he relentlessly slaughtered every beast until the area was completely cleared. As dawn shattered the darkness, he teleported back to his chambers. This grueling cycle had become his absolute reality. Suddenly, Mala slipped into his room, offering a polite greeting while demanding he rise. The exhausted hero desperately tried to avoid using his hypnotic arts on the poor maid, but necessity forced his hand. He needed crucial intelligence regarding this mysterious matriarchal kingdom. Through her mind, a dark truth surfaced. The reigning queen had been barren for an agonizing long era. In an empire entirely governed by women, this spelled absolute catastrophe. Without a royal daughter to claim the supreme throne, the kingdom faced ruin. Even worse, highborn maidens were perishing under mysterious circumstances. Desperate to preserve their sacred bloodline, the royals elevated a noblewoman to the rank of royal concubine. Miraculously, she bore a healthy infant. That very child grew up to become Aliyah, the kingdom's second princess. Basking in boundless affection, her life was pure bliss until her 7th winter. Then, the true queen miraculously delivered a rightful heir. They named her Amanda, the beloved maiden. Living up to her title, the queen showered her with overwhelming devotion, especially since the newborn possessed a terrifying God-given talent for mana manipulation. In the blink of an eye, Aliyah was completely stripped of her heir status. The very moment Amanda reached her 7th year, she effortlessly ascended to the undeniable rank of the first princess. The entire kingdom rejoiced, while Aliyah lingered in the shadows, masking her crushed spirit. Deep down, the devastating realization struck her soul. From that fateful dawn onward, her sheer existence held absolutely zero value in this cruel empire. Erased from public memory, discarded by her own flesh and blood, the royal court treated her like an invisible ghost. This tragic fate forced Aliyah to endure agonizing isolation, becoming an emotionless, living doll. Takafuji felt a profound connection. They were two outcasts, burdened by zero expectations from this unforgiving world. Flashing a surprisingly tender smile, she softly urged him to rise, warning him that despite the agonizingly dull lectures, they were absolutely crucial for his continued survival. The drained hero merely yawned, utterly bewildered by her sudden, intense nagging. After all, she usually treated him like thin air. Her tone shifted as she mentioned rumors of his ongoing immersion into the lethal arts of shadow espionage. While he lacked even a single drop of magical talent, this shadowy path offered a solid glimmer of hope for surviving the trials ahead. Yet, a burning frustration gnawed at our hero's mind. Why was he entirely incapable of channeling this world's mystical energies? It was an infuriatingly rare curse. Even Nala, a low-ranking servant, could effortlessly bend multiple objects to her absolute will. Yet, Aliyah fiercely defended his worth, stating that the legendary commander Iyana Aceto, a relentlessly occupied warrior, would never waste her precious time mentoring a total failure unless she sensed immense hidden potential. But the pessimistic boy scoffed, suggesting the commander only craved the glorious prestige of forging an otherworldly hero. Instantly, fury flashed in Aliyah's eyes. She violently slammed her hands against the wooden desk, vehemently rejecting his excuse. She held absolute faith in his latent strength, desperately yearning to see his fighting spirit ignite. Taken aback by her overwhelming physical proximity, he froze. But she abruptly spun around, coldly commanding him to follow her lead. Soon, they were descending into the castle's abyss. Following an agonizingly deep spiral down into the darkness, an imposing, colossal gate blocked their path. Chanting ancient runes, she unlocked the seal, declaring this chamber his new brutal training ground. Her voice dropped as she reminded him of his shameful reputation as a defective hero. Locking eyes with him, she demanded to know if that humiliating title crushed his pride. Takafuji stood totally baffled. What catastrophic shift had ignited such blazing passion within her today? Ever since her tragic downfall, she had masterfully suffocated every single ounce of her true feelings. Her lifeless facade was so utterly perfect, the court mercilessly branded her the hollow doll princess. Yet, Standing for him now, that illusion shattered. The meek, invisible girl had completely vanished, replaced by a fierce presence. Striding into the terrifying chamber, a breathtaking, giant runic array illuminated the ceiling. This ominous room would test his true limits. Her tone turned absolutely lethal as she warned that his current pathetic trajectory guaranteed permanent exile. Cutting off his desperate defense, she chillingly quoted the ruthless doctrine of the previous matriarch. The Empire owes absolutely no shelter to worthless souls seeking refuge. Unfazed by the brutal ultimatum, our nonchalant hero simply shrugged, casually dismissing the incompetent label. He proudly defended his unique sensory ability, citing its immense tactical value. She agreed, but at the same time, his lack of visible dedication infuriated her. Harboring a divine system blessing meant he had an absolute duty to shatter destiny itself. Sadly, the exhausted Takafuji spent his daylight hours nodding off at his desk, entirely because he waged brutal, secret wars throughout the night. Unbeknownst to her furious assumptions, he bathed in nocturnal bloodshed to desperately level up his stats. Frustrated, he fired back, swearing he was pushing his fragile limits to the absolute brink. His covert progress simply lacked the flashy, earth-shattering aura of the other heroes. Nor did he possess her brilliant strategic mind. Suddenly, Aaliyah dropped a terrifying revelation. This underground sanctuary housed an impenetrable soundproof barrier. Touching the heavy iron door, a cold sweat broke out as she whispered that no soul could hear his agonizing screams. Panicking, the cornered hero desperately searched for an escape mechanism. Without a single warning, her eyes darkened, her legs snapped and up, delivering a bone-crushing kick to his spine. Boom! He violently crashed face first against the solid stone wall. Utterly stunned and dizzy, he stared back in shock. Glaring with raw agony, she condemned his wasted privilege. He held the power she desperately craved, yet squandered. Know that stepping past those castle walls meant instant death by lurking beasts. Hence, he was forced to fight tooth and nail for survival, swallowing his pride. That brutal kick? A mere breeze. Our unlikely hero seemed to relish the fierce strike. Fascinating. He gazed in awe, realizing the fragile, porcelain puppet princess he once knew had vanished completely. Her voice echoed, demanding he seize his own destiny. Without warning, an earth-shattering chuckle escaped him, escalating into an absolute uproar of laughter. He confessed she possessed a terrifying, breathtaking beauty. He realized he had profoundly misjudged her hidden depths, never anticipating such fierce willpower. Eyes narrowed. She demanded to know if this was a cruel joke, but his grin faded. He solemnly declared that out of all 4 summoned champions, he valued his own survival above absolutely everything. Sensing the chilling gravity in his voice, she conceded her own blindness to his true potential. The very second, his latent aura erupted. Her breath hitched. The suffocating pressure was overwhelming. Offering a polite nod of gratitude for her brutal honesty, he muttered that with his mask slipping, a new survival strategy was desperately needed. The absolute reality was that abandoning this fortress meant losing vital intel. He had to bide his time. By dawn's light, standing upon the sparring fields, temptation whispered. Should he unleash his divine blessing's terrifying might just to secure his sanctuary? But alas, labyrinth expeditions were stalled, and beneath the blazing sun, his powers were utterly useless. As the grueling bodily drills concluded, our calculating protagonist cornered the vanguard commander. He initiated a high-stakes negotiation, desperately hoping to sway the monarch's ruthless decree of exile. But the atmosphere instantly chilled as the commander bluntly stated his plea was an impossible dream. Desperation lacing his tone, he questioned if she also viewed his cosmic talent as trash. Despite his seemingly lackluster display, he was giving his all. But before his defense could fully materialize, the veteran warrior silenced him, revealing that his hidden prowess had not gone unnoticed. Instead of mockery, she offered him a coveted spot in her elite midnight vanguard. Shock paralyzed him as she detailed how his unique affinity was an absolute game-changer for abyssal labyrinth raids. He could forge himself into an irreplaceable asset on the battlefield. Yet, the harsh truth remained. A weakling's voice held zero authority, and his mere promises would never melt the queen's icy resolve. However, by forsaking the glorious hero title and pledging his blade as a lowly royal guardsman, he could secure immunity from banishment. The weight of destiny crashed down upon our hero. He keenly understood that donning the kingdom's crest meant wearing invisible chains forever. This monumental choice, tying his fate to a crumbling empire, required deep contemplation. Bowing respectfully, he expressed gratitude for the lifeline but requested a brief shadow of time to weigh his soul. The commander calmly accepted his hesitation, offering her unwavering support whenever darkness clouded his path. Striking with piercing honesty, our protagonist immediately questioned if she expected him crawling back post-banishment. Gazing into the horizon's abyss, she offered a cryptic, perhaps. Several fateful suns set. Dozing over ancient tomes, he pondered whispers of an impending invasion by foreign dignitaries. His instructor confirmed the invasion by foreign dignitaries, grand arrival, announcing a lavish, empire-wide banquet honoring a multitude of prestigious emissaries. The academy grounds would halt all combat trials. Drained to his very core, our protagonist silently cursed the heavens, agonizing over his total ignorance of this chaotic festival. Yet, his heartless mentor simply scoffed, claiming dreamers forfeit their right to crucial intelligence. A bitter pill to swallow, he recognized that this ruthless instructor truly despised his very existence. Soon after, the legendary Golden Cavalry breached the capital's gates. Explosions of colorful mana painted the sky in pure jubilation, while our cynical hero scoffed at a bankrupt empire flaunting such astronomical wealth. Temptation tugged at him to blend into the chaotic festivities like a phantom, but the sheer dread of exposing his miserable status to arrogant nobles quickly crushed that fantasy. What if their inquisitive eyes dug up the catastrophic secret of the four summoned champions? Avoiding that political nightmare was paramount, so he chose the shadows. However, staying hidden didn't mean remaining completely blind to the grand stage. Channeling mana, he awakened his 2.0 cosmic eye, projecting his astral consciousness. Soaring through the opulent corridors, he spotted the twin royal heirs, noting his strict mentor looked absolutely breathtaking in her regal attire. Yet, her signature-plastered smile masked a storm of hidden agendas. Gazing upon the decadent mountains of delicacies, a stark realization struck him. Nala's words were pure deception. Their previous exchange had unveiled the dark truth behind the empire's impending financial ruin, these gold-draining galas. The reigning monarch harbored a toxic obsession with parading a flawless illusion of absolute royal majesty, mercilessly bleeding the national vaults dry for vanity. Suddenly, an unexpected twist shattered his astral focus. A menacing faction cornered Ryu. His instincts screamed the truth. These were the rival champions summoned by a foreign sovereign. Standing among them was an anomaly, radiating raw power with striking golden hair. The warrior's exotic presence completely shattered the illusion of a typical Japanese wanderer. Activating his celestial appraisal, golden text materialized, revealing the rival's identity. Masayoshi Date. A smirk formed as he mused over such a stereotypically heroic title. However, the true mystery igniting his curiosity was why this golden-haired hothead was fiercely roaring at him. Ryu instantly read his lips to decode the message. The blonde warrior roared Takafuji's name, fiercely demanding that he step forward to face an absolute duel. Damn, things were escalating way too fast. The royal banquet crashed to a sudden halt. Aya's voice pierced the tension, officially announcing Takafuji's arrival. Every hero present locked their gaze, and our protagonist knew fate had cornered him. Masayoshi stepped into the light, issuing a formal challenge for a blood match. Dead silence swallowed the room as everyone awaited his answer. Naturally laid back, our hero simply sighed, questioning why it must resort to barbaric combat. Masayoshi bellowed that this battle would prove to the divine goddess that Takafuji was completely unworthy of her. Divine affection. Completely baffled, Takafuji blinked, but the blonde knight snapped at him to drop the innocent act. Masayoshi then revealed he fully knew Takafuji had entered the sacred White Realm, encountering the exact deity who summoned their souls into this fantasy world. Our hero just shrugged, uttering a casual "so what," since everyone experienced that. Then Masayoshi dropped a bombshell, revealing he had asked for the goddess's hand in marriage. Her divine condition? If he completely crushed Takafuji Nori in battle, she might just consider his proposal. Reality hit our boy like lightning. That wretched deity wasn't merely throwing her divine baggage his way. She was actively plotting to eliminate him entirely. He swore absolute vengeance upon that treacherous goddess the moment they met again. Bizarrely, the remaining chosen warriors exchanged bewildered glances, utterly lost regarding this white realm and goddess nonsense. In a flash of insight, Takafuji deduced their summoning process was entirely different, hence their complete ignorance. Explaining the true mechanics of this world would be far too exhausting right now. Choosing the path of least resistance, he maintained his clueless facade. He smoothly told the furious knight he had zero clue regarding his accusations, yet boldly accepted the challenge anyway. The blonde warrior grinned wickedly, while our hero calmly pointed out they solely needed to determine the battle conditions. A standard one-on-one brawl would be a total mismatch. After all, completely unlike the elite heroes, he lacked superhuman stats or a combat class. Surely, this majestic knight wouldn't sink so low as to intentionally crush a weakling plagued by absolutely every terrible disadvantage possible. Because if that was his grand strategy, it would be a thoroughly pathetic display of honor. Masayoshi furiously roared a denial, vowing to accept whatever crazy trial Takafuji threw his way. Gasps echoed as the crowd witnessed this foolish pride. Taking the bait, our mastermind casually brought up the perilous dungeon where he was scheduled for nightly training. The wager? A ruthless race to execute the first floor's terrifying boss before the other. Masayoshi enthusiastically agreed, praising the brilliant concept and locking in the showdown. However, Ryu urgently cautioned our hero that while he could easily bypass the dungeon's deadly traps, executing the monster chief was mechanically impossible for him. Yet, our protagonist simply flashed a sly grin, hinting at a brilliant master scheme. The fateful clash took place the very next dawn. Post-match, Her Royal Highness coldly demanded to know if he was indeed Takafuji Nori. She furiously demanded an explanation for accepting a sacred duel, only to get utterly annihilated. Our boy silently agreed that Annihilated perfectly captured it. Masayoshi had erupted like a violent storm. Absolutely zero monsters survived his wrath, and the floor guardian was obliterated in mere seconds. Meanwhile, our cunning rogue strictly used his detection skills to completely ghost the enemies. The undeniable truth remained. He suffered a humiliating, crushing defeat. The grim-faced queen declared she had been turning a blind eye to his agonizingly lazy and pathetic nature. She solely tolerated him because the legendary knight commander sensed hidden potential within his soul. But after this disgraceful display, he had severely shamed their glorious kingdom, an unforgivable sin in her royal eyes. Aya braced herself, already sensing the impending doom. Without hesitation, the monarch passed her cruel judgment. Takafuji Nori was permanently exiled from the royal domain. The eldest princess smirked with twisted satisfaction, while the remaining heroines cast mournful gazes. However, the person grinning with absolute, overwhelming joy was none other than our cunning hero. The mastermind had orchestrated this exact outcome. The sovereign demanded if he dared object, and he firmly stated yes. He demanded to know exactly how his actions damaged the realm's prestige. She scoffed, calling it blindingly obvious. By suffering a humiliating defeat, he had tarnished the nation's immaculate honor. With a smirk, he countered that as a mere foot race, he definitely lost. Yet, the true wager of their sacred clash centered entirely around absolute worthiness. It was nothing but a petty squabble over a specific maiden's affection. Furthermore, he smoothly added, both competitors swore a binding oath to conceal the match results from the public eye. Not to mention, he wasn't officially recognized as a divine champion here, keeping his existence a total phantom to rival empires. Possessing zero combat strength, zero political clout, and zero public identity, it was logically impossible for his loss to shame their glorious castle. When stripped to its core, their dramatic clash was essentially just a foolish childhood game. However, our strategist had brilliantly exploited his dungeon entry, maxing out his tracking skills. Tossing a heavy pouch of jingling coins forward, he casually presented his meager spoils. The sovereign and her daughter gasped in sheer amazement as he humbly offered this glittering bounty to the crown. Her Majesty beamed with greedy approval, while our protagonist smoothly downplayed the feat, claiming his unique sight made it a total breeze to unearth. In reality, Takafuji simply wasn't ready to abandon his comfortable royal lifestyle just yet. Thus, he weaponized this gold to literally purchase his temporary salvation. With one masterstroke, he silenced the oppressive royals and completely dodged Masayoshi's exhausting heroics for the foreseeable future. And, returning to the shadows, his nightly grind continued in absolute secrecy. So long as his growing strength remained completely hidden, he was perfectly safe. However, the repulsive taste of that wretched avian blood was severely testing his patience. Suddenly, he scanned his surroundings, realizing he had circled back to his exact starting point. These treacherous woods were completely scrambling his internal compass, forcing him to rethink his tracking methods. Pushing his limits, he fused his demonic sight with his sensory skills, instantly exposing a hidden ward, veiling an entirely different zone. It operated as a cunning, high-level spatial mirage, silently redirecting lost wanderers. Yet, beneath his piercing gaze, the trick dissolved, making him question what lethal anomalies lurked beyond. Relying on his fail-safe shadow step for an emergency retreat, he boldly crossed the threshold. Waiting in the gloom was a colossal beast, commanding a fierce pack. Barely advancing a single inch, he detected hostile rustling. Several massive predators were closing in fast. Facing monstrous entities far exceeding his normal prey scale, he instinctively deployed his snare array. A deadly labyrinth of magical wires materialized instantly, and in mere moments, the snarling beasts were utterly slaughtered. Confronting a larger swarm in direct combat would have absolutely proven to be a truly fatal disaster. Fortunately, his strategic snares required minimal effort, effortlessly trapping the mindless brutes. Tossing the mangled carcasses straight into his dimensional storage, he noted these prey yielded vastly superior vitality than those pathetic birds. A brief moment later, he discovered a moonlit tree resting upon a serene forest lake. The eerie atmosphere practically screamed of an epic final showdown. Chuckling to himself, he muttered that reality wasn't some fantasy game. But before the words left his mouth, an overwhelming presence materialized at his back. Faster than thought, his entire limb was violently severed. Utter shock froze. His mind as a devastating swipe launched his body crashing brutally through solid timber. His brain scrambled to process the sudden carnage, only to find the nightmare hovering right above him. This was no ordinary monster, but the legendary Fenrir. Panic flared as he recognized this entity, transcended mere demonic origins. Clinging to life, he deduced it was an apex terror, granting him a sheer sliver of survival chance. Shadow traversal remained viable, yet initiating it against such godly speed seemed mathematically impossible. Time fractured as the gargantuan wolf unhinged its jaws, diving down to deliver a catastrophic execution. Timber shattered into dust under the impact, but the hunter vanished into thin air. Utilizing a desperate blink, he reappeared high above, sprouting wings to take flight. Flashing back to the brutal dimension that forged his vampiric dominance, he gritted his teeth, shocked to unleash his trump card so early. The ancient beast growled, demanding his true motives. Its telepathic voice confirmed its frightening, transcendent nature. Feigning ignorance, the shadowed rogue claimed he was merely a wandering soul astray. But the mythic guardian snarled, rejecting the lie, exposing how he deliberately pierced the forbidden sanctuary's veil. Cornered, Takafuji smirked, confessing his insatiable greed. Such elaborate magical wards usually conceal profoundly legendary artifacts, igniting his plunderer instincts. Slicing through the chatter, Fenrir decreed that words were utterly useless. The invader's massacre of its kin demanded payment in blood. Undeterred, Takafuji flashed a menacing grin, retorting that the Guardian's endless monologuing only validated the existence of a priceless treasure. Now, his burning obsession to uncover the hidden prize was entirely absolute. Preparing for slaughter, the majestic wolf offered a grim parting blessing before sending him to hell, revealing this territory was bound by an ancient witch's covenant. Driven by a forgotten oath, their bloodline had eternally shielded this sacred ground. Their sole existence revolved around obliterating any trespassing entities or corrupted souls. Thus, a vile pest like Takafuji warranted absolute execution. Channeling apocalyptic aura, the predator promised a mercifully swift demise if the boy surrendered his life peacefully. Yet, Takafuji's attention shifted entirely to his miraculously restored arm. His newly awakened vampiric healing factor was terrifyingly superior to his wildest theories. Coiling its immense muscles, the wolf acknowledged this prey possessed unnatural, monstrous resilience. Erupting forward like a missile, the beast roared that such an anomaly must be eradicated immediately. Takafuji desperately evaded as a kinetic shockwave decimated the battlefield. Pushing his demonic perception to its absolute zenith, he miraculously predicted the devastating trajectory. Launching skyward, reality hit him hard. Achieving victory against this titan was mathematically impossible. He orchestrated a tactical retreat, aiming to soar high before plunging down to shadow step away. Yet, mid-flight, the apex, Predator unleashed an apocalyptic storm of glacial spears. Crossing his arms for impact, the devastating frost blast vaporized a massive oak, cleaving it with razor precision. The wolf locked its terrifying gaze onto his soul. Without a single microsecond of delay, it lunged for the kill. A thunderous shockwave erupted as the rogue barely dodged death again. The beast's godly agility rendered his hypnotic arts completely useless, systematically sealing every possible exit vector. Spotting a raging cascade ahead, his mind raced to formulate a desperate survival strategy. Above him, the divine wolf descended like a frost erupted as the beast lunged. Our hero braced for impact, but the devastating strike completely obliterated his ethereal wings. The mythical wolf sneered, diving for a lethal kill. Yet Takafuji just smiled, channeled his raw power into the earth, and unleashed a massive eruption of wooden spikes. The legendary predator narrowly sidestepped the deadly ambush, avoiding a gruesome impalement. He had secretly hoarded massive timber in his spatial storage for this exact life-or-death scenario. However, the grim reality was that this desperate gambit barely tipped the scales. As the giant wolf locked onto his soul, Takafuji desperately scanned the battlefield for a warp window. He needed a fleeting moment of hypnotic distraction, chanting shadowy incantations to stall the impending doom. Drawing his deadly throwing blades, he locked eyes with the monster, which immediately braced to strike. Takafuji realized a single flawless opening was his only salvation. His menacing aura exploded outward, leaving the beast questioning his suicidal strategy. The main character understood this predator possessed insurmountable might. Its savage jaws had already come terrifyingly close to shredding his spine. In a split-second gamble, he unleashed a fierce storm of daggers straight at Fenrir. The creature mocked the pathetic attempt. Such feeble strikes meant nothing to a legend. With a casual tail whip, a freezing glacier manifested, but our hero deflected the freezing shockwave with his blades. Relying on his miraculous healing, he knew protecting his vitals was the only way to survive this nightmare. Meanwhile, the mighty Fenrir felt a flicker of absolute awe at this mortal's insane resilience. Suddenly, the youth triggered a hidden snare of shadow wires. The entire forest battleground had been secretly rigged, instantly entangling the mighty beast in dark restraints. The unstoppable predator finally looked completely paralyzed. A confident grin crossed Takafuji's face, but then the ancient timber violently exploded. The alpha predator coldly declared that such pathetic tricks were entirely useless against him. Paralyzed by overwhelming dread, the young warrior shifted his focus to an immediate retreat. Knowing a single gamble remained amidst the lethal hailstorm and the beast's savage jaws, he desperately prayed to the heavens that his final trick would succeed. Kicking off a shattered trunk, he soared toward the clouds with parkour mastery. The arrogant wolf believed the fool was attempting an aerial retreat. Scoffing at the stupidity, Fenrir unleashed a devastating frost whip, mocking how easily the boy had doomed himself. However, during that chaotic dance, Takafuji's mystical eye had covertly woven an invisible shadow web. Now, his entire flight path transformed into a massive warp matrix. Triggering the mystical trap, he fiercely declared, "Your hunt ends right here." The bewildered beast watched his prey dissolve into thin air, utterly confused by the sudden disappearance. But Takafuji had already materialized atop the monster's spine, chillingly whispering, "Checkmate, you overgrown mutt." In a flash of merciless steel, he violently plunged his blades into the predator's eyes. Fenrir unleashed an earth-shattering shriek of pure agony, while our hero coolly mocked the beast. Blinded by rage, the legendary beast violently thrashed its massive tail, annihilating the entire landscape in a destructive frenzy. One terrifying shockwave almost crushed our main character. Yet, against a sightless enemy, evading death became child's play. Initially, Takafuji assumed he had merely crippled one eye. Instead, his lightning-fast strike had successfully ruptured both. The apex predator was plunged into absolute darkness. Suddenly, its sudden, eerie stillness triggered a horrifying realization for our hero. It was tracking his scent. The overwhelming, suffocating aura of murderous intent rolling off the creature was absolutely paralyzing. The giant jaws snapped forward again, but our main character merely sighed, deciding it was time to vanish. With the beast's reaction severely dulled, executing a warp spell was a breeze. Fenrir remained in the ruins, furiously searching for his vanished prey. Multiple spatial jumps later, the exhausted warrior crashed onto his mattress, drained of all energy. Despite surviving hell, his ultimate attack had merely scratched the legendary monster's pride. But he swore next time, victory would be his. Taking swift action, he began secretly raiding the royal armory's deepest vaults, hoarding top-tier mystical ores and unbreakable metals to prevent another near-death catastrophe. More importantly, during their savage clash, the clever youth had successfully snatched a cluster of Fenrir's legendary fur. This divine material possessed absolute crystallization and unmatched defensive traits. The moment he channeled shadow mana into it, the strands turned harder than diamonds. This finally revealed why the seed beast's physical blows carried such a devastating surge of magical energy. Realizing this divine resource responded violently to human mana, he envisioned forging the ultimate magical arsenal. Pouring his soul into crafting, he forged a legendary string known as the Gleipnir thread. These absolute bindings were virtually unbreakable against any physical force, and when charged with potent mana, they instantly solidified into an impenetrable crystalline shield. This was the ultimate cheat item. Not even the legendary Alpha Wolf could shatter these divine chains. Striking absolute genius, he wove these shadow threads into a combat gauntlet, granting him that same terrifying hardening and indestructible armor. Thanks to the beast's relentless assaults, he had harvested a massive bounty of mystical fur, fueling an even more ambitious crafting project. By dawn, the main character stood clad in a fully customized, impenetrable battlesuit and reinforced greaves. The time for vengeance had arrived. A blinding golden explosion violently rocked the woods, catching Fenrir completely off guard as Takafuji emerged. "Hey, miss me?" he mocked with a chilling smirk. Femur exploded with blazing fury. This arrogant human trash had actually dared to desecrate his sacred territory again. The mighty beast remained completely blind, yet Takafuji casually mocked how stunningly gorgeous its empty sockets looked. The monster violently snapped, roaring for silence. The main character smirked. Even permanently blinded, the beast remained terrifyingly precise. The apex predator then growled its ultimate warning. No living soul enters this deadly domain twice and survives. Takafuji realized that between its blinding agony and absolute bloodlust, this creature possessed an unbreakable warrior's will. Plus, its luxurious coat was far too majestic to ignore. He had to kill it and harvest more. Femur unleashed furious strikes until Takafuji calmly tapped a tree. Suddenly, shadowy wolves burst outward from the wood. The blind boss panicked, entirely overwhelmed as merciless fangs tore into his flesh from all directions. Takafuji coldly laughed, stating its keen nose should already recognize this nightmare. The mighty Alpha was literally being devoured by the reanimated corpses of his very own pack. The beast bellowed in absolute fury, demanding how this human dared commit such an unforgivable sin. But our hero simply smirked. They seemed quite useful, so he forced them to serve him. The massive wolf violently thrashed, throwing everything away. Shattered shadow wolves went flying everywhere, and a stray shockwave nearly obliterated Takafuji. The protagonist's initial assault barely scratched the creature, but it bought him the perfect window of time. Still, the raging Alpha managed to unleash a devastating claw. Strike! He narrowly triggered a mid-air teleport right as the pack swarmed the forest. The exact second he materialized behind a massive trunk to breathe, Femur's bloodthirsty jaws were already lunging for his throat. Only a split-second flash step saved his life. The giant beast grew violently insane over this relentless dodging game. As Takafuji suddenly materialized directly overhead, the monster coiled its muscles, fully prepared to launch a lethal counterattack. But right then, Takafuji flashed a sinister grin. "Whoever said I was desperately trying to escape?" The apex predator leaped, only to crash into invisible razor wires, instantly becoming paralyzed. The trapped beast couldn't comprehend this defeat. Even with its godlike senses, it had detected absolutely nothing. Hovering victoriously in the sky, the restrained wolf demanded to know what twisted sorcery this human had cast. Our protagonist coldly revealed, "These lethal wires were woven using your very own fur. That is exactly why your legendary senses failed you. They perfectly mimic your scent. From the exact second he set foot here, every single strike he took, and every shadow beast he summoned was nothing but a calculated smokescreen. While the ferocious alpha was totally distracted, our mastermind had been flawlessly weaving this deadly web all along. Now perfectly paralyzed, the mighty guardian was utterly defenseless. With a chilling farewell, Takafuji wished the beast sweet dreams and ruthlessly triggered the fatal wire compression. The sharp strings constricted, smashing the beast into the dirt. Shadow wolves watched in absolute silence, utterly defeated. The alpha wondered if his reign was truly over. If he died, the sacred pact would also break entirely. But unfortunately, it was far too late. Takafuji didn't merely slaughter the mighty boss, he had completely drained its lifeblood. That one epic execution alone violently spiked his power by 5 whole levels, granting him phenomenal new skills. Suddenly, a startling notification flashed before his system menu. A unique skill titled Bastard King. Suddenly, a voice reverently called him Master. Turning around, he discovered it was the fallen wolf pack. The spectral creatures bowed deeply before him, suddenly possessing intelligent speech, undeniably thanks to his awakened demonic authority. Our hero pondered if this crazy perk affected all undead servants. Stepping forward, one shadow beast humbly pleaded, "Great Master, why not resurrect Femur as your loyal servant too?" Their fallen alpha was a fiercely noble guardian who had bled endlessly to defend this sacred territory and had fearlessly shielded their entire pack. Driven by pure loyalty, the spectral beasts desperately begged for their old king to join forces. Takafuji took a brospent, slow breath. Logically, gaining a powerhouse boss carried 0 real downsides. The only glaring issue? He was completely drained of mana and dangerously running low on energy. Meanwhile, across the realm at a lavish castle banquet, Ryu loudly observed that the first and second royal princesses completely despised each other's guts. Tamaki instantly shot that rumor down, arguing it wasn't toxic hatred, just clashing royal personalities. Aoi remained highly skeptical, fueling the fiery gossip even further. Takafuji, on the other hand, literally couldn't care less. He was absolutely raging, mad that his royal meals constantly reeked of garlic. Out of nowhere, Ryu suddenly insisted our indifferent protagonist should intervene and resolve this bitter sisterly feud. Annoyed, our boy demanded why he was dragged into this drama. Surely Tamaki could resolve it. As fellow women, they naturally possessed the emotional grace to casually counsel the royal heirs, but Ryu stubbornly doubled down. Since Takafuji shared elite classes with the second princess, he naturally maintained a significantly closer connection, making him the absolute perfect bridge to shatter their icy hostility. Rolling his eyes, Takafuji bluntly shot back that the first royal heir was unimaginably stubborn, making any diplomatic ceasefire utterly impossible. But with a sly, knowing grin, Ryu told the reluctant hero to completely stop worrying. Just speak up, and she would instantly yield. Utterly confused, our hero demanded a reason, so Ryu dropped the ultimate romantic bombshell. She was completely, madly in love with his oblivious self. Seeing the girl's disgusted expressions, our protagonist instantly realized Ryu's social standing was plummeting straight into the abyss. To seal the deal, Ryu sweetly bribed him with 1 completely free day off every single week. And considering our lazy protagonist deeply loathed grueling morning drills, he accepted the deal instantly. The catch? He first had to confront the proud elder princess. Steeling his resolve, he bravely knocked on her royal chamber door. Standing fiercely with her arms crossed, she haughtily declared that she was strictly granting him an audience. He solely came because Ryu begged him, so she better speak fast. Stepping inside, his only desire was to flee, straight back to bed. Before a single word escaped his lips, she arrogantly announced that, just for today, he was permitted to speak to her face. He ought to bow in absolute gratitude for this honor. Completely tuning out her conceited rambling, he simply stared at the overwhelming extravagance of her royal quarters. Catching his wandering gaze, she proudly smirked, entirely convinced he was mesmerized by her endless fortune, dreaming of treasures he could never touch. Instead, he blankly pointed at a goofy duck statue, questioning her bizarre taste. Amanda harshly scoffed, mocking his ignorance. As highborn royalty, every single luxurious item she possessed came directly from the queen or elite aristocrats. Our protagonist desperately wished to vanish into thin air, choosing to finish this agonizing mission immediately. Gathering his patience, He finally questioned the deeply strained bond she shared with the lorded second royal daughter. Amanda viciously silenced him, coldly declaring the girl meant absolutely nothing to her. Takafuji instantly regretted ever agreeing to this utterly cursed arrangement. Exhausted by her dramatic ego, he bluntly revealed Ryu requested his aid to help the estranged sisters finally communicate. However, Amanda shot back with icy indifference, claiming zero desire to reconcile. He simply could not. Bewildered by her logic, he endured her icy scolding that a mere peasant dared to interfere. Massaging his aching temples in pure exhaustion, he decided to play his final trump card. He casually dropped Ryu's name into the conversation, emphasizing that their precious comrade would be utterly heartbroken if this grand scheme failed. Instantly, her icy demeanor vanished into burning excitement, demanding every single hidden detail. Thankfully, her naive innocence made her incredibly easy to manipulate. Moments later, under the fading sunlight, Amanda confessed their bitter rivalry was a recent tragedy. During their golden childhood days, a beautifully unbreakable bond truly united them. They shared endless whispered secrets from dawn until dusk. Aaliyah possessed a brilliant mind, their daily adventures overflowing with boundless joy and pure magic. Amanda absolutely worshipped the ground her brilliant sibling walked on. Yet suddenly, a suffocating coldness struck as Aaliyah mercilessly pulled away. Soon after this tragic rift, a 7-year-old Amanda was crowned first princess, violently thrust into the heavy destiny of ruling the empire. But this crowning glory brought a shattering revelation. Aaliyah shared neither her noble bloodline nor the royal womb of her empress. That devastating truth shattered their perfect world permanently, forging the bitter hostility that poisoned their current reality. The brutal reality of seizing the crown demanded absolute, soul-crushing discipline. Only by surviving that hellish crucible of endless royal trials could the breathtaking warmth of Aaliyah's pure heart finally struck her. Deep down, she desperately yearned to have Aaliyah back by her side. Yet, the cold-hearted adults shattered that bond, forcing a massive chasm between them. Hiding her pain, she turned away, claiming her tale was finished. The truth finally dawned on Takafuji. Her haughty facade was merely a tragic armor, forged by the adults who molded her. Much like her barren chambers, absolutely nothing held her true essence. Every single possession, and incredibly, even her own soul, had been ruthlessly carved out by others. Feigning absolute supremacy was her sole, desperate cry to showcase just a sliver of freedom. Slumping dramatically onto her desk, Amanda sighed that since she had bared her soul, he had better grant her some wisdom. Takafuji firmly declared she must face Aaliyah, and announced that from this very second, she was claiming her as a true sister. Amanda fiercely countered that such bold words would ignite vicious rumors among the servants. He simply chuckled aloud and challenged if mere servants somehow outranked royalty. It was utterly absurd that the destined queen lacked the absolute authority to rule her own destiny. She argued this would hurl Aaliyah into dangerous chaos, but he firmly reassured her that Aaliyah possessed a resilient spirit far beyond her imagination. Trembling slightly, she finally whispered she would deeply ponder his bold counsel, offering a silent gaze of gratitude. He quietly vanished from the chamber. Hours later, he unveiled the entire truth to Nala. The quiet servant absorbed the tale with a chilling indifference. Nevertheless, she vowed to relay his words. Our clever protagonist realized this covert path was their ultimate move, knowing Nala shared a profound bond with the second princess. Come the dawn of the next day, Nala mysteriously approached, declaring she carried an urgent decree from the second royal. He immediately demanded answers, and she revealed Aaliyah commanded an impromptu, intense trial of skill for today. A heavy dread washed over poor Takafuji, instinctively sensing that absolute chaos was brewing. Thrust into the roaring heart of the city streets, he trailed behind the two radiant royals. He desperately wondered why destiny dragged them into this crowded mayhem for mere instruction. Aaliyah brightly declared that mastering the raw pulse of the streets and soaking in the kingdom's true aura was vital for a ruler's education. Therefore, he was drafted to escort her directly into a vibrant boutique. He nervously questioned their objective, and she playfully commanded they hunt down some exquisite jeweled treasures. Stepping inside the grand emporium, he questioned why noble blood would personally scavenge for such trinkets. She, however, was entirely mesmerized by the glitter, suddenly demanding to know which piece shined brightest. Feigning interest, he simply muttered, "They both looked spectacular." Aaliyah's sharp command snapped him into focus. The mysterious present was never meant for her. Utterly bewildered, he listened as Nala finally revealed it was a gift to celebrate the first princess's grand birthday. Upon hearing his report, Aaliyah instantly decided that tomorrow they would embark on a shopping trip for her newly discovered sister. Acknowledging this, he questioned why his input even mattered to them. Aaliyah reasoned that since he had invaded her chambers and spoken at length, he surely understood Amanda's preferences far better than she could. Yet, he pointed out that her quarters held mere offerings, lacking anything she had personally selected, making any item acceptable. The second princess questioned if presents were entirely worthless, prompting his profound response that true worth stems purely from the giver's heart. Therefore, he firmly believed any item she picked would absolutely be flawless. Nala assumed the youth spoke from sheer kindness, but realistically, he offered quick responses just to rush home and sleep, instantly. Regardless, the second princess beamed with pure joy and dashed off for her purchase. The maid commended our protagonist, claiming his brilliant intervention sparked this wonderful plan. Witnessing Aaliyah's radiant smile, she whispered how breathtaking it felt, seeing her truly joyful once more. Aaliyah sharply pivoted, questioning their secret whispers, forcing Nala to hastily deflect. 5 entire days flew by. At the absolute minimum, they secured invitations to the first princess's magnificent birthday gala. The majestic hall practically overflowed with absurdly luxurious feasts and arrogant elite nobles. Every aristocrat loitered about like awkwardly sketched caricatures, exactly as he ruthlessly described, while our hero surveyed the entire room through his demonic vision. Per routine, he eavesdropped on elite chatter alongside Aaliyah, subtly, searching for the elusive second princess. Suddenly, he caught her cowering behind a massive marble pillar, clearly terrified of stepping toward her little sister. Given Amanda's engaging conversation with Ryu, interrupting that specific dynamic was understandably an incredibly daunting task. Choosing to act completely clueless, he resolved to force her hand, materializing out of nowhere, right beside Aaliyah, startling her into demanding his sudden purpose. Takafuji fired back that since she previously kicked him, she lacked any right to complain. Questioning where her former bravery vanished to, he mercilessly shoved her straight forward. Suddenly, she crashed directly into Amanda. Aristocrats stared in absolute bewilderment, while our protagonist silently prayed this chaotic encounter wouldn't morph into a total catastrophe. Having crossed the point of no return, she merely needed to surrender the present. Taking a heavy breath, Aaliyah thrust the delicate box toward Amanda. Pausing for a tense heartbeat, Amanda slowly unveiled the treasure hidden within. She instantly declared her burning desire to wear it, allowing Aaliyah to gently pin it into her hair. Spinning to question her appearance, Aaliyah warmly confessed it looked absolutely stunning. Amanda beamed brilliantly, and the lavish celebration smoothly resumed. Surprisingly, Amanda audaciously demanded one more gift. She desperately wanted Aaliyah to address her as Big Sister. Struck completely speechless, Aaliyah found precious childhood memories violently crashing back into her mind. Overcome with emotion, she softly vowed she gladly would. Astonished, Amanda lunged into a deeply tearful, heartwarming embrace. Meanwhile, Takafuji casually observed the spectacle, relieved that at the very least, this ridiculous hurdle was finally cleared. Oddly, the royal monarchs watched with visible delight, leading him to realize these sisters had foolishly prolonged this drama over nothing. Ryu approached our hero, praising the brilliant tactical decision to have him completely orchestrate this event. Our guy smirked, declaring his exhausting efforts definitely warranted an exceptionally generous and worthwhile physical reward. Ryu chuckled, promising to secure an item of actual value. Yet glancing at the reunited princesses, his heart swelled with genuine joy over their reconciled bond. Takafuji, however, mentally rolled his eyes, utterly disgusted by how perfectly heroic this guy always appeared. Muttering a quick farewell, he escaped the stifling room for fresh night air. Stepping onto the balcony, Aaliyah suddenly materialized, offering profound gratitude. Our stoic hero simply waved off her appreciation. The silent courtyard remained completely empty, keeping their private conversation totally hidden. Smiling softly, Aaliyah admitted his sensory magic made things remarkably effortless. Takafuji questioned if her heart felt lighter after finally unleashing her bottled feelings. Flaring up in defensive fury, she snapped that if anyone lacked emotional depth, it was absolutely him. But instantly, A horrific massacre erupted across the glittering ballroom. Pure terror paralyzed the crowd, as our boy chillingly realized Aaliyah's lifeless doll moniker would vanish forever. A blood-curdling shriek violently ripped through the grand hall, whipping both their heads toward the carnage. Aaliyah attempted to sprint forward, but he aggressively shielded her path, demanding absolute stillness. A severed head soared through the crimson air. The royal monarchs were brutally slaughtered. What absolute nightmare had unfolded? A booming voice roared, commanding the corrupt nobility to silence. He aggressively proclaimed the fallen sovereigns had ruthlessly squandered the kingdom's vital wealth while starving innocent citizens. The pathetic king, utterly failing to restrain his queen, rightfully earned his bloody execution. Therefore, Vit, a powerful warrior coursing with true royal bloodlines, would forcefully claim the throne. Furthermore, the enigmatic woman named Ayana would reign as queen. Unbelievable. The assassin was the exact commander who relentlessly trained our hero. Suddenly, this lethal game turned disastrously complex. The duo stood utterly paralyzed while devastated. Amanda collapsed beside her mother's decapitated head. Surging with grief, she immediately unleashed her dazzling magical aura, screaming at the lunatics. She furiously charged a blinding light sphere. But sadly, this wasn't mere. A brilliant strategy. Moving like a phantom, she instantly carved through her defenses. It wasn't a lethal strike, yet witnessing it genuinely brought me sorrow. Pity washed over me for the girl. But I had to admit the commander looked absolutely magnificent as that worthless scum crashed down. She writhed, consumed by agony, while the devastating blow sent her tumbling across the stone. The summoned heroes froze in absolute horror as Ayana commanded Ryu to freeze immediately. Should he attempt any retaliation, his demise would be unimaginably gruesome. Suddenly, Vitera's voice roared through the chaotic hall, declaring that these arrogant royals were merely naive pawns, serving the vile witches. Daring to summon otherworldly heroes was the ultimate betrayal. This foolish choice was an unforgivable heresy, a monumental sin that only bloodshed could cleanse. Heartbreakingly, as innocent Amanda desperately wailed for her sibling, the ruthless Ayana struck her down without any mercy. Absolute madness. This terrifying commander was a plot twist nobody could have predicted. My entire reality shattered. The villain I despised became my favorite, while my beloved ally transformed into a monster. Aaliyah nearly charged forward, but our main character knew that charging in meant certain death. As she opened her mouth to scream, he violently clamped his hand over it, intensely whispering that exposing their hiding spot would be a suicidal blunder. A full-scale uprising was an absolute nightmare he never anticipated. Without hesitation, Vitera commanded the loyal soldiers and furious citizens to drag these wretched fools straight down to the depths of hell. Suddenly, a panicked nobleman attempted to protest, only to be brutally impaled from behind before uttering a single word. The twisted bastard gleefully smirked toward the heavens, triumphantly roaring that he had finally cleansed the corrupt royal bloodline. He proclaimed that agonizing death awaited anyone opposing the witches. Takafuji frantically whispered into Aaliyah's ear, begging her to suppress her blazing fury before she got herself violently butchered. Either she surrendered to mindless rage and perished pointlessly, or they needed to escape this bloodbath immediately. The second Amanda fell. Ryu desperately sprinted toward her lifeless corpse. He furiously screamed that this slaughter was absolute madness, insisting nobody deserved execution over something so ridiculously trivial. Yet, Vitere coldly sneered, mocking the otherworldly heroes for their naive innocence. He coldly declared that every single pathetic noble present was entirely unworthy of drawing another breath. These sheltered fools were completely blind to their nation's agonizing decay. Ryu's voice cracked with fury, roaring that mass execution was completely unnecessary. However, Vitere ruthlessly retorted that witnessing the capital's hidden horrors would shatter his naive worldview. With a chilling glare, he commanded Ayana to immediately subjugate the otherworldly saviors. Her overwhelming aura erupted, radiating an intoxicating yet lethally terrifying presence, as she calmly warned Ryu that yielding would be his only chance at survival. But Ryu was entirely consumed by blinding rage. Igniting his ultimate limit break blessing, he recklessly unleashed a devastating torrent of radiant energy at her. Astoundingly, Ayana didn't even flinch. With terrifying elegance, she nonchalantly raised her blade and effortlessly deflected the strike. She offered a condescending smirk, praising his decent combat instincts and raw spiritual energy. Consumed by desperation, Ryu charged again, unleashing a relentless hurricane of ferocious strikes. Yet, as Ayana casually danced through his desperate onslaught, it became devastatingly obvious that victory was utterly impossible. His destructive aura violently shredded the Grand Hall, while Elway desperately maintained a magical barrier to deflect the chaotic shrapnel. Tamaki anxiously warned that they absolutely needed to grab Ryu and flee this slaughterhouse immediately. The crushing reality, however, was that an army of bloodthirsty soldiers had completely surrounded them. Escaping this deadly ambush would require a miracle. Ayana stood perfectly composed, while the exhausted Ryu violently gasped for air. She arrogantly mocked them, noting that since Tamaki remained paralyzed by fear, crushing them would be effortlessly simple. Ryu barely deflected her swing before she vanished and reappeared inches from his face, whispering ominously. She coldly reminded him that continuing this pathetic struggle would only guarantee a miserable defeat. Surrendering was his only logical choice. Following that, she promised to permanently erase the second princess from existence. Aaliyah lay completely paralyzed, broken on the floor, while our main character urgently delivered a harsh reality check. They needed to vanish instantly, or absolute slaughter was completely guaranteed. Her spirit wavered in pure terror, but he aggressively pushed back, demanding to know if she would pathetically surrender again after witnessing this horrific tragedy. The devastating truth struck Aaliyah like a thunderbolt. He was ruthlessly reminding her of the agonizing moment she cowardly abandoned her sister to fate. In that heart-stopping instant, an unbreakable resolve ignited within her soul. She swore to survive this nightmare and forge a path of ultimate, bloody vengeance. She refused to let Ayana dictate her tragic demise. A fierce grin crossed his face as he vowed to drag her out of this hell. However, from this fateful moment onward, the royal titles were dead. She was no longer a princess, just Aaliyah. Suddenly, with a deafening, metallic shatter, Ryu's sacred blade exploded into countless fragments. Crushing despair washed over him as Ayana coldly whispered her final judgment before delivering a devastating, bone-crushing kick straight into his abdomen with her armored heel. The agonizing impact made the poor hero violently spit out his lunch from 3 days ago, while Tamaki's heart sank as she witnessed their ultimate trump card get effortlessly humiliated. With Ryu entirely incapacitated, she realized that every passing second dragged them closer to the jaws of certain death. She frantically resolved to rescue Ryu before his execution, but in the blink of an eye, Ayana shattered Ellie's barrier into dust with one effortless swing. Terror paralyzed the girls, while the ruthless commander barked out the final order to subjugate the remaining survivors. A swarm of heavily armored guards violently ambushed the girls, ruthlessly slamming their faces into the unforgiving stone. Honestly, they were incredibly fortunate to survive with their heads still attached. Ayana mercilessly ordered the prisoners dragged into the deepest dungeons to viciously mock their pathetic defeat. Ayana glared down at the broken Ryu, coldly wondering aloud if her intense martial arts training had been an absolute waste of time. Watching this devastating tragedy unfold, Aaliyah silently vowed that this monstrous villainess wouldn't be able to crush her newly awakened spirit, escape solo. But this princess wasn't alone. She had our hero. Unleashing his detection skill, he mapped out the perfect escape route, letting them vanish like shadows past the patrol. Sprinting through the dark, Aaliyah felt awe at his massive detection range. He quickly asked about her magic skills, and she admitted she only grasped the absolute basics. Suki pointed ahead, warning that in 10 seconds, 3 guards would strike. She had to eliminate them. Panic flashed in her eyes, begging to hide, but he grimly stated hiding wasn't possible anymore. Inhaling sharply, she gave a resolute nod as his deadly countdown began. 2 seconds. Blades flashed. 1 second, and she unleashed roaring winds. 3 suffocating air spheres engulfed the guards' heads, stealing their breath, and they slumped down, completely defeated. Takafuji smirked in awe. She truly was his master. Alia sighed, noting it was far simpler to cast spells with prep time. Suddenly, seeing his utterly exhausted state, she anxiously asked about his condition. Our hero scoffed, declaring that their ruthless enemies couldn't care less about his fatigue. Without pausing, he dashed forward, urging her to exploit this temporary blind spot. Crushing those grunts was easy, but he knew he stood absolutely no chance against Ajiana. Evading her monstrous presence was their ultimate mission. That monster existed on an entirely different plane of existence. Ducking into a desolate chamber, He swiftly verified the coast was clear. Scanning for a secret exit, he gently checked her mental state. He had to ask, because a horrifying slaughter of every royal maid had stained the palace red. The sheer cruelty of butchering innocent servants chilled his very soul. Aliyah stumbled toward a corner, desperately screaming for Nala. An innocent soul, violently stolen. She hugged her tight as our boy recalled the maid's pure devotion. Nala only ever wanted to see the princess smile. Swallowing his rising sorrow, he stood in respectful silence. With trembling hands, Aliyah laid her friend to rest and softly thanked him for pausing. He claimed it was fine since he desperately needed stamina. Yet the burning question remained, how would they survive this? Meanwhile, the three captured heroes rotted behind iron bars. Ayana mockingly revealed her unbreakable magical seal binding their dreary prison, trapping them completely. They were utterly helpless. Tamaki defiantly demanded she remove their restraints if her cage was so flawless. She made a bold point. However, Ryu growled that the Heroes' Alliance would wage absolute war over their capture. This was a trap. They were prime political hostages, bound so tightly just to prevent them from taking their own lives. Ayana smiled with venomous praise, amused by his surprisingly sharp logic despite his fiery temper. However, Ryu's blazing aura erupted in pure, unadulterated wrath. Even his allies shivered under the overwhelming killing intent flooding the dark cell. The ruthless commander knew that vicious glare. Flashbacks of her own blood-soaked battlefield days mirrored that exact, tormented expression. It was the face of absolute despair at one's own pathetic weakness, echoing her own tragic past. She stood, studying Ryu's rage-filled eyes. Turning her back, she coldly warned that his youthful naivety would get him killed if he let emotions control his blade. Had he maintained his cool earlier, perhaps Tamaki or Awe would be free. Now, they were all doomed hostages. She vanished into the shadows, leaving them wallowing in utter disgrace. Ryu crushed his fists until they bled, boiling with fury that this villainess dared to preach like a wise mentor in such a humiliating defeat. Meanwhile, ascending the cold stairs, the enemy marveled that the fugitives remained hidden. Takafuji was proving far more elusive than anticipated. Back in the shadows, Takafuji hesitated, finally deciding to risk it all. He questioned if the royal bloodline knew about this secret. She confirmed the grim truth. The legendary royal escape tunnel. Doubt clouded her eyes, uncertain of success, yet cornered prey has zero alternatives. Their fateful path was set. Aliyah cast a mournful glance, whispering a tearful apology to her forever sleeping friend. Tragic weakness cursed them. All she could offer was a heartbroken thank you for the maid's ultimate sacrifice, a truly devastating blow to the soul. Elsewhere, the bloodthirsty legions swarmed the fortress, hunting their prey. Takafuji desperately planned to maximize this singular fleeting chance at survival. But a glaring flaw loomed over the royal tunnel. It was far too obvious Aliyah would choose that exact path. Takafuji felt despair creeping in, out of options, lacking any miraculous play to pull them from the abyss. Suddenly, he threw his arm out, halting her. They were marching into a deadly ambush. Not just a mere patrol, but an impenetrable wall of steel. Even worse, heavy footsteps echoed from behind. Retreating the way they came was a guaranteed death sentence. Panic seized the bewildered princess. Where could they possibly run? Was their fate sealed in this inescapable trap? His voice turned ice cold. Survival was impossible. The enemy brilliantly predicted their desperate dash toward that secret door, locking down the entire sector. Olivia realized all hope was shattered. Now, the certainty of capture, meant a fate far worse than death. Brutal agony awaited, making this escape a nightmare. Dark doubts clouded his mind as the walls closed in. Was this the agonizing moment he would surrender? However, her fierce gaze shattered his hesitation. She absolutely refused to die on her knees, vowing to claw to survival. She fought until her final breath. Suddenly, her aura exploded with resolve, leaving Takafuji absolutely breathless and staring like a bewildered soul. His dark eyes sparked with wild hope. Her unyielding spirit ignited a fierce new possibility, prompting him to reveal a secret. His sensory magic had just caught a massive hostile legion marching toward their exact location. She questioned the enemy's numbers. He suspected a devastating horde. Whether they were saviors of the crown or merciless butchers remained a mystery, but foreign boots were marching across the border. She demanded answers from Gwyn, who predicted their arrival by sunset. They only had 15 agonizing minutes left to survive. Soon, the entire battlefield would erupt into glorious, bloody chaos. The only tragic catch was the inescapable bloodshed waiting for them. She offered a silent, determined nod. Takafuji calculated their bleak odds, knowing survival was a brutal 50-50 gamble. Escaping the Reaper's scythe now relied entirely on blind fate. He commanded her to sprint toward the thinnest enemy lines, while strictly guarding their blind spots. But the shadows betrayed them, as hostile guards roared out that the royal target had been located. The hunters had found their prey. A deadly storm of steel rained down instantly, but a brilliant arcane shield suddenly erupted from the girl's trembling hands. She screamed through the chaos that 15 minutes was all they needed. She refused to die in this wretched hellhole. Her absolute focus anchored the glowing defense, yet lethal shafts of death continued to whistle inches from her delicate frame. Takafuji barked a frantic order to dodge right, and she barely cheated death as a wicked blade severed her silken blade strands. The bloodthirsty battalion roared commands to encircle their desperate prey. In that moment, Takafuji realized the hunters were blitzing at terrifying speeds. Activating his three-dimensional spatial awareness, he detected an ambush striking from the flank. At his urgent warning, she manifested another desperate blockade. The relentless pursuers paused in sheer awe, but quickly resumed their slaughter. Her fragile ward crumbled in 10 fleeting heartbeats. Takafuji felt a grim respect that they were not dead yet. Despite agonizing fatigue, they stubbornly sprinted through the labyrinth. As the bloody sun dipped lower, their desperate flight ended at a twisted, suffocating dead end. They were completely trapped. Despair flooded her exhausted eyes as Takafuji muttered a dark apology. Every single exit was crawling with armored killers. The trap was sprung. Brutal reinforcements flooded the corridor, triumphantly roaring as they prepared to unleash a final barrage of agonizing death. Aaliyah screamed to take cover, while the savage hounds debated their execution method. Ultimately, the merciless squad chose a Nislaja squad, cowardly ranged execution. But her mana reserves were completely drained. At this disastrous rate, her shattered defenses would inevitably collapse into dust. Another deadly storm rained down, forcing her desperate, flickering aura to shrink into a violently shaking glimmer of hope. Devastating shockwaves blasted the stone walls as the enemy barked orders for the killing blow. Yet, against all odds, her fiery spirit burned on. Her absolute defiance shocked the heavily armed veterans. She ignited one last barrier against the endless metallic downpour. Spinning around, she cried out Takanori's name, just as the bloodthirsty squad cheered their guaranteed victory. However, a chilling realization silenced their triumph. The male target had vanished like a ghost. Aiya was fading fast, but the most devastating tragedy was her blind ignorance. Where had Leori gone? Her desperate cries echoed through the empty shadows. The soul-crushing truth finally pierced her breaking heart. She was nothing but a disposable decoy. The beautiful promise of glorious reinforcements and surviving together had been a venomous lie designed to milk her magic. As the executioners aimed their fatal strike, she stood utterly paralyzed by the profound betrayal, shattering her soul. Suddenly, bleeding twilight pierced the iron grates, carrying a suffocating, terrifying pressure that completely dominated the very atmosphere. A menacing silhouette manifested, casually apologizing for his dramatic delay. The slaughter was now exclusively his playground. She stood completely speechless, unable to process the horrifying shift in reality. The panicked platoon felt a suffocating, demonic aura flooding the corridor, desperately demanding illumination. The monstrous entity hidden within his soul was finally clawing its way out. He coldly ordered Fenra to feast. Those ignorant lambs never saw the colossal nightmare lurking in their blind spots. Damn! Absolute carnage erupted instantly. Massive fangs effortlessly crushed armored skulls and shredded fragile throats. The once arrogant hunters were reduced to weeping prey, shrieking for salvation that would never arrive. They were nothing but agonizing midnight snacks. Severed limbs twitched in the suffocating blackness as the claustrophobic hallway drowned in oceans of crimson gore. Leah collapsed onto the chilling stone, traumatized, while the last surviving victim scrambled backward in pure, unadulterated terror. He frantically screamed for his slaughtered commander, but Takafuji simply watched with a bone-chilling, devilish grin. The broken guard kept begging for mercy, prompting our anti-hero to deliver a frozen threat. Your pathetic shrieks are utterly useless, because nobody is coming to save you. Whipping around in frantic paranoia, the soldier shrieked Liori's name into the dark. Yet, the merciless master casually asked Fenner about his meal. Instantly, the demonic beast materialized behind the survivor, purring that only this one remained. But honestly, they were pathetically weak. The soldier completely breaks down, crashing against the cold stone wall, crying for mercy. Takafuji simply states, "I watched. You slaughter countless innocents. It is only fate that your life pays the toll." Such a brutally simple, ruthless reasoning, yet perfectly balanced. He stands there, an absolute phantom. The trembling man stutters his name in pure terror, but receives only a chilling, "Who knows?" The shadow beast instantly tears into his throat. Another life extinguished. And our fierce heroine? She fought, with everything she had. Now, she rests in a spreading crimson lake. Gasping his name, she reveals her fading mana is barely holding her shattered body together. But our protagonist remains an iceberg. "A valiant effort," he whispers, "but this is the absolute end. You've drained too much life force. Death is already claiming your soul." Coughing, she demands to know if his hidden strength existed all along. He softly rejects her gaze. True, this monstrous aura belongs to him, but it only awakens beneath the silver light of the moon. That legendary tale of incoming backup? A complete lie. He never needed saving. He wove that grand illusion simply to grant her a fleeting shred of hope. Staring at her fading form, he recognizes her gaze, eyes burning with unyielding vengeance. Even standing at death's door, her broken spirit refuses to shatter. Witnessing that fire, a dark curiosity blooms within him to test her absolute limits. But then, a shocking pivot. He bluntly questions her purity. Shock ripples through her failing mind. Suddenly, Ankine is profoundly terrified by this sinister bargain. He presents a twisted lifeline, a dark path to defy death itself. But the heavy price? Becoming his place, eternal subordinate. By sacrificing her fragile humanity, she would resurrect as a creature born of nightmares. The ultimate decision now rested in her trembling hands. Despite the bizarre terms of this unholy pact, she is rapidly drowning in a lake of her own blood. Flashes of her fallen comrades cross her mind, shattering any lingering hesitation. If surviving meant selling her mortal soul to the absolute devil, she would gladly pay the toll. The dark ruler smiles at her wicked resolve. Gripping her fragile throat, he whispers that her dying instinct was right. He is far more demon than deity. His fangs mercilessly pierce her flesh. Demonic energy floods her dying veins. He lays her upon the cold stone floor, commanding the shadow beasts to stand guard. Their sole divine mission is protecting their new queen until her awakening. Far away in the royal chambers, scouts urgently report that the second princess is entirely trapped. The sovereign slowly nods, acknowledging the grim news before ordering the immediate execution of their grand plan. A glorious empire was awakening, leaving absolutely zero room for weak-hearted hesitation. The monarch desperately wished to eradicate the endless famine plaguing his ruined lands and heroically save every forgotten child from the decaying streets. A narrative painted far too purely for comfort. Still, he confesses an overwhelming wave of crushing guilt for standing idle for so many agonizing years. His true hidden motives remain shrouded in thick fog. He recognizes the immense blood spilled to reach this absolute pinnacle. Gathering loyal visionaries was a grueling trial, but the dawn of a new kingdom had finally arrived. Or so the foolish king believed. Suddenly, Takafuji blitzes the throne room, painting the halls in crimson. The royal guard freezes in pure terror. And stepping from the shadows, the golden-haired warrior, Ayana, returns. She sensed the rotting corruption instantly, and rightfully so. The sovereign is already butchered into a lifeless heap of flesh. Our dark hero coldly hoists a severed, bloody prize into the air, boldly declaring that their entire, grand scheme is annihilated. The battle is over. Yet, chaos refuses to sleep. Waves of heavily armored knights violently swarm the hall, screaming for brutal vengeance. Unfazed, our protagonist materializes his shadow blades, embracing this chaotic route. He welcomes the absolute slaughter. Since destiny brought them to this bloody stage, they should bathe in the carnage until the last dying breath fades. A catastrophic strike mercilessly pierces their weak armor instantly. Takafuji maliciously thanks the foolish soldiers, promising that if they somehow survive his unholy wrath, the bloody entertainment will be extraordinary. Elsewhere, elite female knights sprint down the marble corridors, their hearts racing as echoing screams of absolute agony completely bounce off the castle walls. The wails echo from the throne room, forcing them to dash madly. Bursting through the heavy royal doors, they find the Reaper himself, casually standing over the massacre. Hands deep in his pockets, his cold eyes shift, recognizing them clearly as Ayana's personal elite guard, the legendary Valkyrie squad. The leading captain furiously screams Takafuji's name, demanding to know if this monstrous bloodbath was truly his wicked doing. A sinister smirk graces his lips as he questions if his confession would unleash her true killing intent. The air itself suffocates under immense bloodlust. A furious knight grinds her teeth and lunges forward blindly. But in a blinding flash, cold steel pierces her. A lethal counterattack. Her face twists in sheer disbelief. Takafuji coldly mocks her crumbling composure, asking if that slaughtered comrade was truly someone precious to her heart. Through a terrifying blend of dark optical illusions and lethal precision, he cleanly impales the charging warrior, flawlessly eliminating her in one devastating motion. Her surviving comrade freezes in pure bewilderment, facing an utterly untouchable phantom. Snapping to reality, the knight desperately rallies Miranda and Alice, warning them to brace for impact. This monster is a living catastrophe, demanding total absolute caution. Takafuji is genuinely intrigued. Despite witnessing their sister slaughtered, their battle formation holds firm. Gripping her enchanted weapon, one fiercely declares a lethal tactical strike directly at his vitals. Activating his diagnostic skill, Takafuji analyzes their armaments, realizing these mystical blades are unlike any standard equipment forged in this realm. Suddenly, biting frost entirely encases his leg. One warrior proudly claims her snare, while the other prepares an epic breath. A lethal arrow narrowly misses his head. Then, a magical barrage follows. The sheer velocity of these warriors' awakening was absolutely terrifying. The devastating impact literally tore the flesh right off his cheek. No joke. She vanished into a blur of pure speed. Glancing back, she boldly declared her absolute victory. Yet, a twisted grin remained painted on his bleeding face. Who knew he possessed such monstrous endurance? Well, the terrifying truth had arrived, and this sheer resilience caught them completely off guard. He kept advancing. How was this possible? Panic set in as she realized he was dodging perfectly to prevent fatal damage. However, that hesitation sealed her doom. Lunging forward for a lethal blow, she suddenly found herself ensnared in invisible, razor-sharp wires. Wait, it wasn't just her. Every single comrade collapsed helplessly to the cold ground. The grim reality hit. This absolute monster was about to slaughter them all. Chuckling, he praised their beautiful teamwork, but darkly added that his precious time was rapidly running out. Therefore, he offered a generous, deadly proposition, a true one-on-one deathmatch. For mere entertainment, he challenged the squad's fearless leader first. Meanwhile, shock paralyzed the survivors. Fighting now? This lunatic had completely lost his mind. He smirked, openly acknowledging her undeniable status as the absolute pinnacle of their ranks. A flawless solo battle would finally unleash the terrifying depths of her hidden strength. So why chain her immense talent to such pathetic deadweight? Fueled by blinding rage, she ground her teeth and explosively launched forward. Effortlessly parrying, he listened as she shrieked for his silence. How dare this monster speak like he understood her heart? The tension skyrocketed. Takafuji smoothly shifted his stance, brandishing a hidden dagger to casually repel her vicious assault. In that chaotic fraction of a second, a warm memory surfaced. Someone had once praised her brilliant potential. The day Ayana proudly introduced an awkward Maria to the squad. Maria had stood there looking utterly lifeless and tense. Yet, the warriors warmly bombarded her with cheerful questions and welcoming smiles, causing a bright crimson blush. Snapping to reality, she fiercely roared at Takafuji to keep their names out of his filthy mouth. Such disrespect meant certain death. He simply offered a sinister grin, praising her blazing aura. He dared her to strike with killing intent. This maniac relished the thrill, demanding she unleash her ultimate power. Suddenly, his arrogant taunts halted, sensing something completely unexpected. Was she even listening? Disregarding his overwhelming presence, she desperately sprinted to rescue her fallen sisters. Their bond was absolute, because the legendary Valkyries always fought as one. But in that terrifying heartbeat, a blood-curdling shriek pierced the air right behind her. Crack! Razor-sharp teeth viciously tore into her shoulder. Agonizingly crying out for Alice and Miranda, sheer confusion shattered her frantic mind. What was happening? Takafuji coldly whispered the grim truth. Her beloved comrades were already long gone. They had mutated into ravenous abominations. Now, the true nightmare could finally commence. Mockingly, he sighed, wishing this tragedy could entertain him further. But alas, the curtain had to fall. Giving a sickeningly cheerful wave, he left the girls to their gruesome reunion. Pure, unfiltered savagery from a demonic villain, abandoning Maria to be violently consumed by her own family. Nori suspected his evil nature, but this cruelty was unfathomable. Ultimately, the bloody finale of this massacre approached. Beyond the gates, loyal guards were being slaughtered as an anxious hero sprinted inside. Panic consumed her. Finding the villain standing with a sickening smirk, a dreadful premonition crawled up her spine. Inside the grand hall, crimson rivers painted the majestic floor. A horrific sense of doom swallowed her heart. Glancing sideways, primal terror struck her very soul. Time literally stopped as her eyes met a decapitated skull. Trembling, she respectfully reached down to touch the cold remains. Tragically, her darkest premonitions always became devastating reality. Right then, basking beneath the hauntingly pale glow of the midnight moon, a chilling voice echoed, praising the magnificent evening sky. Back in his realm, such poetic words carried far more sinister weight. Delivering a twisted confession, he locked eyes with Nori, presenting the royal skull as a macabre romantic offering. This absolute madman was preparing total annihilation. Gripping the fallen monarch's head, she stood frozen in sheer horror. Tauntingly, he questioned if her demonic aura wasn't proof of eternal damnation. The boy merely returned apathetic, lifeless eyes, entirely unfazed. Bitterly, she declared that such unnatural wings were undeniable evidence of a desperately corrupted soul. Trading away every ounce of human honor for cheap strength was absolutely pathetic. Such a disgraceful path. Calmly, he rejected her high and mighty ideals. Every drop of blood spilled was strictly for survival. Nothing more. Nothing less. Furious, she condemned his pathetic excuse of clinging to life. Her verdict was execution. With unyielding conviction, she struck. Her heart, proudly declaring eternal loyalty to her glorious kingdom. In this merciless realm, a warrior's existence required supreme, selfless purpose, dedicated strictly to protecting loved ones. Selfish survival, or petty vengeance, were unforgivable sins. Staring intensely, she reminded him of a past. Warning, never surrender your humanity to darkness. Hold on. Did absolute regret just slip from her royal lips? This shocking hesitation was incredibly brutal. Would Takafuji tolerate such supreme arrogance? Masking his immense irritation behind a slow, dramatic facepalm, he heavily sighed and softly mocked her sibling's pathetic nobility. Despite her unforgivable betrayal, she arrogantly lectured him like a foolish junior. What an absolute disappointment! Her grand master plan had utterly collapsed into ashes. Coldly commanding her to open her eyes, he declared her tragic isolation. No allies remained. Whispering her name, he ordered her to witness her doom. Shadows warped as demonic beasts poured from the architecture. Fallen warriors scattered the blood-stained ground. No one else remained in this desolate wasteland. The entire Valkyrie squad had vanished. Everyone who marched, beside her, every trusted comrade, wiped out completely. She stood alone as the final survivor. True, a handful of knights were merely incapacitated. Their fragile lives could still be saved. But naturally, that mercy demanded the ultimate price of her. Absolute sacrifice. Yet, this twisted logic made no sense. He dragged her into this nightmare, but now he seemed almost bored. Perhaps this battle would end in absolute disappointment. He pondered using mind control to force her to clash, though honestly, burning fury already consumed her. He casually acted like this entire slaughter was just a tedious game, saying none of it thrilled him anymore. He promised to be merciful, considering the king was already dead. If she fell, this war would finally conclude. He offered to spare the remaining troops, but Ajiana slowly unsheathed her legendary blade. He questioned her desperate resistance, but her eyes held absolute conviction. She drove her steel into the earth, erupting with massive aura. With chilling resolve, she dedicated this violent silence to her fallen comrades, the warriors who were brutally slaughtered, and those prepared to perish for her absolute command. She was putting her very soul on the line against Takafuji. Was this his dark desire? Well, he was about to face hell. Maintaining his arrogant composure, he questioned if she would truly forsake her loyal knights. She fiercely countered that she had devoted her entire existence to forging those warriors, and now, with her own bare hands, she would mercilessly execute every single comrade twisted by his foul control. Takafuji, completely stunned, warned that such absolute slaughter would leave the kingdom utterly defenseless. The entire nation would crumble to dust. She coldly replied that ordinary citizens still remained. Even if the corrupt nobles, the military force, and the entire royal bloodline were wiped out, they were merely collateral. As long as the kingdom's true people survived, a new dawn would rise. That was the exact reason she would butcher him. He suddenly froze, unleashing a sinister grin. She hesitated. Why this sickening satisfaction? He mockingly apologized for doubting her absolute resolve. Playing games now would be an insult. He decided to counter, with brutal truth. Those mangled corpses painting the walls? Just pathetic failures who could not endure the vampire transformation. Salvation was impossible now. The devastating reality was that her cherished comrades were already corpses. To his monstrous army, she was nothing but a fresh meal. The absolute depth of his villainy was finally exposed. Ajiana screamed out Takafuji Nori's name, condemning him as a monster beyond saving. She fully unleashed her blade, erupting with a blinding, divine radiance. She declared him her mortal foe. Takafuji sensed an overwhelming dread and frantically retreated. But with one devastating slash, she obliterated the space between them. He froze in pure terror. Her lethal threat surpassed his calculations. She finally unleashed her ultimate trump card. The legendary ancestral weapon was drawn. He never fathomed his entire ghoul army could be vaporized in a single heartbeat. Yet, that murderous glare in her eyes was his absolute darkest desire. It was his twisted fantasy realized. He threw wide his arms, screaming to the commander that he would unleash his absolute full power to crush her right here. They were destined enemies. Ajiana stood unyielding, staring him down while her devastating aura erupted continuously. The sheer pressure suffocated the entire battlefield. But Takafuji wickedly reminded her that her corrupted allies still stood ready. He craved to see how long her sanity would hold. Suddenly, his gaze shifted to the corrupted Valkyrie squad. Ajiana locked eyes on her former sisters. Through the tragic nostalgia, she unleashed one apocalyptic slash, obliterating the entire vanguard. Beastly wolves lunged, yet her glowing steel cleaved through them, like wet paper. She mockingly demanded to know his problem. Was he simply going to spectate like a coward? If he refused to strike, then she would deliver his end. Takafuji trembled in sheer disbelief. His shadow strikes were completely nullified, and her monstrous power vastly eclipsed his own. Engaging in melee range was absolute suicide. A terrifying memory surfaced when he had once questioned the commander's absolute limits. She had casually stated her innate power was immense, and upon taking the vanguard command, her royal majesty gifted her an ancient relic, a legendary armament that achieved divine sharpness and absolute precision when flooded with raw mana. That explained her reality-tearing strikes. Her fallen comrades were no longer allies, but mindless beasts. Still, those corrupted elite knights were getting butchered like fragile glass. She flawlessly repelled every strike. Takafuji's dark magic proved utterly useless. That shadow, an augmented assassin he relied on heavily, utterly pulverized into nothingness. Staring at Ajiana's mesmerizing sword dance, he was forced to worship its lethal beauty. That divine blade truly severed reality itself, bypassing any need for complex casting circles. Without warning, she executed two devastating, gravity-crushing blows from the sky. Absolute panic consumed his mind as she violently shredded right through his demonic wing. With a killer's glare, she demanded his next move. How would this cornered rat survive without a flight path? Desperately anchoring himself, he plunged a dagger deep into the stone, fully aware that letting her breach his guard meant instant death. He unleashed a barrage of frantic counterattacks, yet her radiant blade erased them like mere dust. clawing against the cracked wall in absolute terror. His desperate survival was, naturally, she closes the distance effortlessly. He twists gracefully through the sky, miraculously weaving behind her. But a devastating strike severs his arm entirely. The severed fist soars away. Hitting the ground, he casually mentions he fought brilliantly. Yet, it appears her deadly strikes possess absolutely zero weaknesses. Remaining entirely fearless, he hears her admit his agility is impressive enough for a circus. Smiling, he politely declines, stating that jumping is not his calling. Suddenly, his gaze falls upon the flawless mithril blade she wields. This legendary weapon lets her channel raw aura effortlessly, enabling casting without drawing a single spell formation. He then casually remarks that this legendary material works absolute wonders against a demonic target, right? She confirms his suspicion instantly, guessing he learned this from the second royalty. She praises his sharp intellect. Gratefully, he appreciates her intense focus on his skills. Yet, the warrior relentlessly advances. Surprisingly, a hidden dagger shoots from his grip, though she effortlessly deflects the sneaky projectile without even glancing. Panic begins washing over our hero, while she mockingly compliments his entertaining arsenal of tricks. Eagerly, she demands to witness the ultimate trump card. Man, can you believe this intense clash? It has been forever since a battle felt this absolutely legendary. Chuckling at her sharp observation, he unleashes his restricting snare technique. Regardless, the fierce warrior effortlessly severs the restraints. Realizing his entire arsenal is completely useless, tension peaks. Suddenly, as she prepares another deadly charge, a massive explosion of brutal strikes connects. Perched above, his familiar rains down raging thunderbolts. Our cunning protagonist brilliantly escaped her defensive zone, strategically positioning his summoned beast afar to unleash devastation. The blonde powerhouse calmly admits his loyal companion holds a brilliant tactical mind. Unfortunately, that massive distance makes predicting the incoming magic incredibly simple. Shockingly, he notices she completely ignored the destructive spells. Her pure battle instincts are downright terrifying. Launching a devastating counter, the beast barely evades. Our protagonist frantically maneuvers, commanding his ally to maintain distance and rain destruction, simultaneously hurling a barrage of lethal daggers. Yet, the formidable warrior blocks everything, coldly praising his overwhelming volume of strikes. However, she questions how long his stamina can endure. Secretly, his goal was exhausting her aura, yet she effortlessly conserves power, obliterating every incoming threat. At this disastrous rate, his weapons and spiritual energy will vanish way before hers. Desperately racking his brain for a viable strategy, he analyzes her impenetrable aura, shielding the battlefield. Her monstrous reflexes render any overwhelming assault completely useless. Furthermore, his familiar's supposedly precise bombardments are completely missing their mark. Suddenly, a strange inconsistency catches his sharp eye. Assuming her instincts are godly, why does her protective aura hug her physical form so tightly? Therefore, he boldly charges forward, suspecting a fatal flaw hides within. The fierce knight questions if this reckless suicide charge stems from assuming she is currently overwhelmed by defensive maneuvers. She mocks his utterly foolish logic. Defeating him requires zero effort. In a flash, she aggressively lunges straight toward his throat. Conjuring a solid shield behind her, the brutal clash resumes. Having already lost a vital hand, our desperate hero might become completely limbless very shortly. Coldly, she declares his final moments have arrived. Piercing his skull with her divine blade will finish this pathetic struggle once, and, for all. Surprisingly, a confident grin appears as he vows defiance. Bursting from the ground, the shadow beast fiercely sinks its fangs into her exposed calf. Manifesting straight from her darkness, he smugly explains that her incredibly tight sensory field left the shadowy abyss completely unguarded. Panic flashes as she hesitates, torn between eradicating the savage monster, crushing her leg, or executing the charging warrior. Believing the snarling beast posed less absolute danger, she fiercely targets the cunning protagonist instead. However, a terrifying realization strikes as she sees his remaining fist. While he sadistically mocks her for foolishly dropping her ironclad defenses, genuine fear creeps in, doubting her legendary blade can secure victory. The wounded hero relentlessly advances, stepping against her protective aura. A sudden chill of mind control hits her, as he reveals she stared directly into his soul. a mystical wall manifests instantly. Though her pupils glow wildly, she fiercely shatters the mental trickery with one slash. Utterly astounded that her supreme weapon slices through raw magical formations, he frantically ignites another art, leaping backward. Sadly, the loyal hound, clinging to her flesh, is brutally eliminated, while she furiously demands answers about his wicked sorcery. Shrugging, he mockingly plays ignorant. Enraged, she orders him to explain his arrogant, manic grinning. Smirking, he claims her frantic reactions are hilariously entertaining. Weren't they both having fun? Snapping back, she screams her utter confusion. Man, this psychological warfare is getting intense. Suddenly, he commands her to gaze skyward. Those previous scattered projectiles, remember them? As expected, she deflected them flawlessly. Now, our hero prepares his ultimate climax. Pupils blazing, armor radiating power, magical arrays materializing at her back. Spotting the complex runes, panic sets in over his sinister scheme. Preparing a devastating countersweep, incredibly, his very own body erupts from the magical vortex. Bewilderment strikes her features, while he sadistically celebrates his flawless prediction that her initial instinct would involve swinging that blade. His true objective meant paralyzing her limb, completely nullifying her lethal execution. Surprisingly, a primal roar escapes his lungs just as pure terror consumes her face. It looks like our crazy protagonist literally bit the fierce blonde. The dire truth was she absolutely could not succumb to this illusion. Yet, with her leg severely wounded, her options vanished. She realized that maintaining her defensive aura would consume her last precious seconds. Thus, she gambled everything on one final strike. Channeling her fierce wind, magic, she launched herself forward. Her blade became a terrifying blur of motion. Naturally, Takafuji instantly sensed the crushing blow this relentless warrior unleashed. Yet, the devastating slash tore through his flesh like fragile silk. The young boy watched in absolute horror, screaming. Then, a sickening thud echoed as a head rolled across the bloody ground. Yes, our protagonist had been decapitated. Meanwhile, the loyal beast Femur charged from the shadows to avenge its master. Unfazed, she unleashed a casual yet lethal wave of energy, instantly obliterating the familiar. The severed head simply lay there in silence. Breathing heavily, she let out a triumphant laugh, bidding her final farewell to Takafuji Leori. This arrogant fighter believed her victory was absolute under the pale moonlight, confidently gripping her enemy's severed head. It had been an eternity since she was forced to unleash her ultimate power, knowing failure meant certain doom. But right as her thoughts drifted toward the royal family's legacy, disaster struck. In a flash of gore, the very hand clutching his severed head was brutally torn away. Stunned and completely disoriented, she realized those fangs had directly crushed her flesh. Before she could react, a monstrous kick from the headless corpse launched her smashing into stone. The battered warrior gasped for air, only to open her eyes to an impossible nightmare. He stood there, casually lifting his own severed skull. He reattached his flesh effortlessly, stretching his restored neck with a chilling smile. Terror gripped her soul as she completely failed to comprehend why. Holy Mithril had absolutely zero effect. Flexing his completely healed arm, he mocked the pathetic assumption that legendary blessed metals could automatically eradicate demonic beings. While that pathetic rule applied to the monsters of this realm, he was a predator from another dimension entirely. Therefore, this world's divine laws held no sway over him. As her mind shattered from the revelation, he coldly explained his earlier deception when his hand was severed. Ediana realized the horrific truth. He had faked his inability to heal, merely to shatter her defensive stance. It was a terrifyingly brilliant psychological trap. Deep down, Takafuji had secretly deduced from the very start of their clash that a cranium was practically useless for his twisted species. During the previous brutal fight against Fenmer, his entire spinal column had been utterly pulverized, yet he moved with the deadly grace of a phantom, defying logic. The absolute truth? A blood demon's beating heart is their singular anchor to life. Flesh and bone mean nothing if the core remains pulsing. Smirking, he humbly claimed that fate alone had crowned him the ultimate survivor of this clash. Truthfully, battling a master swordswoman of her legendary caliber pushed his limits. Accepting her grim destiny, she quietly embraced the end, while he exhaled sharply, admitting this required his absolute peak strength. Suddenly, a manic grin twisted her blood-stained face. She had unraveled his dark secret as well. Gazing down at her broken form, he muttered how utterly shattered she looked. With zero hesitation, he vowed to devour every ounce of her life force. Transforming her into a mindless ghoul lacked artistic flair, hence this permanent execution. Did this absolute monster truly extinguish her life? Takafuji's cruelty knew no bounds. Moments later, stepping out of the shadows, we reunite with the forgotten survivors of this massacre. The demon arrived, mocking the utter chaos Ryu had provoked. The naive hero yelled for Liori, believing the legendary artifact would grant them salvation. The naive girls sprinted toward him with tearful relief, crying out their profound anxiety. With a perfectly crafted cold facade, he acknowledged their feelings, instantly activating his mind-controlling gaze, while whispering that their own survival should have been their primary focus. Sensing the dark shift, Ryu frantically demanded answers, ordering Liori to cease this madness. However, our immortal predator casually ordered him to submit, promising a bloodless escape. Instantly, an overwhelming mental fog crushed Ryu's consciousness. Ordered to retreat, the paralyzed hero internally screamed, completely trapped within his own unresponsive limbs. The Dark Lord was genuinely intrigued by the mortal's incredible spiritual resistance against his overwhelming aura. Regardless, he summoned his newly enslaved maidens closer, gently requesting a deeply sinister favor. They were chosen to completely erase the horrific massacre he had just orchestrated. He smoothly detailed his grand theatrical finale. Handing over a cursed staff, he commanded her to unleash an apocalyptic inferno, perfectly faking his own tragic demise within the burning ashes. Utterly consumed by the mind-altering spell, the girl marveled at the terrifying task. Doubting her own destructive potential, she hesitated, until he coaxed her to shatter her mental shackles and awaken her true chaotic energy. Simultaneously, he commanded Awa to manifest an absolute shield, guaranteeing their survival amid the coming hellfire. Suddenly, the awakened mage screamed in absolute ecstasy, feeling a catastrophic surge of magical devastation coursing through her veins. Panicking, the paralyzed Ryu begged his corrupted ally Tamaki to stop, screaming about the innocent lives still trapped inside the mansion. Blind to his desperate pleas, she smiled wickedly, declaring her absolute intent to unleash her full destructive wrath. Despite his agonizing cries, crimson embers began to dance, instantly erupting into a monstrous firestorm. The grand estate violently detonated into dust, sending apocalyptic shockwaves visible across the entire devastated horizon. Even while sheltered behind Elway's supposedly impenetrable magical aegis, the sheer terrifying heat of the blast scorched Takafuji's skin. Truly, the overwhelming might of a divinely blessed prodigy was awe-inspiring. Meanwhile, silhouetted against the raging inferno, a lone figure watched their former life turn to ashes. Memories flooded back of Amanda, who had tragically perished, alongside the innocent servant, who shared her grim fate. The agonizing weight of losing her beloved parents amplified the crushing sorrow. Fate had mercilessly stripped away her entire world. Yet, against all odds, she survived to walk a fresh path, clothed in newfound resilience. But wait, how did this epic saga truly ignite? She materializes wearing that unforgettable gaze, desperately echoing Takafuji's name. Was she the destined catalyst that summoned his soul into this cursed realm? Such magic utterly defies logic. Mysteries aside, he questions if the bloody massacre has ended, while she demands to know if his brutal purge is complete. Astonishment flashes across his face. She completely foresaw his master plan. She reveals that the second his dark essence merged with hers, his secrets became hers. Wait, their souls merged? It must be the aftermath of that fateful, blood-binding bite, correct? Though the sudden, mystical shift in her hair color was an unexpected shock. Naturally, he points out that altering her physical appearance is far superior to suffering a gruesome demise. However, she admits a strange sensation, feeling as if his overwhelming consciousness and dominance are heavily suppressing her own mind and commands. Hesitant, she doubts possessing the sheer strength to strike him. He mockingly shows gratitude, but shockingly, landing the brutal blow takes zero effort. She ruthlessly drives him into the dirt. Yet, sprawled on the earth, he chuckles, declaring this cursed situation holds hidden perks. Furthermore, he admits her transformed, radiant locks fit her perfectly. Ah, bound to Takafuji's dark destiny now, isn't she? Her gloomy aura vanishes completely. Steeling herself, she firmly agrees. All was not stripped away. She cheated death, snatching a fragile shard of liberty. The devastating price was merely her entire royal bloodline, her sister, and her former glorious life. Yet, a fierce resolve burns within her, having finally discovered a true purpose. She doubts whether, while trapped within this degrading servant pact, she can ever surpass his terrifying power. But shattering his limits is precisely the ultimate goal she desires to reclaim her absolute independence. Takafuji hides a smirk, thoroughly impressed, praising her rebellious ambition. Poor naive princess, completely oblivious to the harsh truth. Bound beneath such an absolute, mystical soul contract, defying him is physically impossible. Brushing it off, he announces that since the fallen royalty has finally embraced her dark, twisting fate, they must depart for his hidden sanctuary. Bewildered, she watches him march into the creeping shadows, but he sharply commands her to follow, explaining that, after dropping such mind-bending revelations, fleeing this blood-soaked battlefield is their highest priority. Following blindly, she remains utterly breathless and mesmerized, because how is this even real? He casually manifests an ancient illusion barrier, erasing their presence entirely. He even erected a secret hideout within the void. Fascinated, she demands to know how he constructed such high-tier sorcery. Shrugging, he reveals his overpowered crafting abilities handled it. Regardless, she stubbornly protests that the interior feels incredibly lackluster, right? Plus, it's claustrophobically cramped for a duo. The weary Takafuji simply sighs, bluntly reminding the spoiled noble that, obviously, this makeshift shelter pales compared to her former majestic palace. Concealing a gigantic fortress is a tactical impossibility now. Adding to the brutal reality check, she must adapt to surviving in this cramped box lacking even a basic mattress. Gracefully settling on the floor beside him, she softly declares she truly could not care less. The royal title never defined her soul anyway. Furthermore, sacrificing luxury means nothing. She intends to slumber intimately right, there against his side. Ultimately, he is her sole savior from the Reaper's grasp, severing her worldly obligations completely. Caught wildly off guard, he recoils, stunned, as she desperately claims her own body is her only valuable currency. Hold on. What madness possesses her? What forbidden sacrifice is she attempting to surrender right now? A deeply bewildered Takafuji silently questions her sanity. Chuckling darkly, he notes her eager submission means issuing absolute commands is unnecessary. Immediately, she boldly vows her absolute readiness. He commands her to strip, and miraculously, her lingering wounds vanish instantly. Heavens above, what chaotic sorcery is this? Brother? Absolute madness. Leaping to her feet with blazing enthusiasm, she nervously asks if her devotion pleased him. Ignoring her, Takafuji unleashes his ultimate, eye-glowing, artifact-crafting ocular power. Oh, you absolute rogue, you forged a stunning armor set for her. Utterly bewildered, she hesitates. He bluntly admits it felt incredibly bizarre, staring at her wearing filthy, blood-stained rags. Furthermore, he coldly clarifies their master-servant pact never implied anything inappropriate. Above all else, he exclusively dictates the companions permitted into his inner circle. To throw her dignity away so easily, her ego must be massive. Ouch, an ice-cold rejection that completely shatters her confidence, leaving her thoroughly humiliated. Trembling violently from the harsh reality check, she stammers a frantic thank you, fleeing the scene in shame while his mind concludes, she remains a clueless, pampered royal. Pacing outdoors, the humiliated maiden mutters curses about her catastrophic blunder. What sudden urge possessed her to attempt a move, so boldly shameless? Her only genuine intention was proving her fierce, unyielding dedication. Tragically, destiny spared only her from the massacre, transforming her into the lone survivor who seemingly betrayed her crumbling kingdom, abandoning her slaughtered kin. Perhaps this endless humiliation is heaven's cruel, agonizing retribution. Shattering her gloomy thoughts, Takafuji unexpectedly questions if offering her pure body to a monster was the divine punishment she sought. Startled, she violently flinches, while he coldly mocks that it is astonishingly disrespectful to treat intimacy as a mere penalty. Flustered and completely disoriented, she scrambles to apologize again, insisting he wildly misread her pure intentions and possesses zero comprehension of her profound, soul-deep gratitude. With narrowed eyes, he clearly rejects her frantic excuses. Driven to absolute desperation, she forcefully pleads for him to trust that her sworn words carry unshakable truth. Despite sacrificing her humanity to become a dark creature, cheating death brings absolute relief, harboring zero regrets regarding any of the bloody consequences. Smirking, he suddenly mentions an experimental technique he needs to test, demanding her assistance. Her eyes shining eagerly, she vows that if it involved anything within her newfound power, she is fully committed. He reveals absorbing a massive arsenal of abilities during the castle slaughter, yet one highly specialized power remains utterly impossible to trigger solo. Burning with undeniable motivation, she confidently promises her unwavering support, ready for fierce battle, until he casually drops the bombshell that it involves an intimate, explicitly sensual requirement. Her jaw drops in disbelief, screaming internally, "Wait, excuse me, what does that imply?" Grabbing her fragile garments, he menacingly reminds her, "You boldly swore your absolute loyalty, so prepare to face the consequences." He brushes it off as a harmless, stimulating touch before they slumber. Blushing furiously, she scolds him, firmly warning that such wicked indulgence corrupts the mind. But he ruthlessly exploits her reckless vows, trapping her in absolute submission. Unbelievable. When all the chaotic dust finally settled, he still shamelessly capitalized on the intense situation. "Damn you, Takafuji, you absolute, unapologetic menace." As the shadows deepen in the thrilling next chapter, while piercing the clouds, he reviewed his newly awakened arsenal. From lethal blade mastery to mundane domestic arts, the sheer volume of abilities was staggering. Without hesitation, he pushed every single skill to its absolute limit. He signaled the little witch to descend. Honestly, watching her, he questioned who possessed the true genius trait. Her aerial mastery had reached terrifying speeds. He casually checked if her new garments felt comfortable or needed tailoring. She dismissed it, praising their battle readiness. Her unwavering confidence left him utterly speechless. Unlike him, she unleashed her raw magic seamlessly, regardless of the hour. Tossing her a pristine blade, he urged her to test it. The second it cleared the scabbard, a menacing crimson aura erupted. Mesmerized, she praised the weapon's lethal elegance, questioning if he had altered its very core. He admitted he infused the steel with forbidden dark magic. It evolved into an ancient relic of pure abyssal energy, but that title felt way too excessive. So, Black Sword it was. She marveled at this god-tier weapon, though he bitterly confessed that in his grip, the blade remained entirely dormant. His foreign soul simply lacked the specific mana recognized by this realm's laws. A frustrating realization dawned on him: this universal rejection would likely plague all his endeavors. That was exactly why he entrusted this demonic blade to her capable hands. Honestly, its awakened demonic aesthetic was overwhelmingly intimidating. Flashing a dangerously playful grin, she teased, questioning if arming her was a fatal mistake. He smirked, daring her to try her absolute best. His own arsenal of power-ups was endless. True strength transcends mere weapons, anyway. More importantly, his incompatibility with this world forced him to master otherworldly techniques entirely alien to this dimension. She nodded, fully aware that his very existence shattered this reality's logic, granting him infinite growth. The ultimate clash between them would undoubtedly be legendary, yet she casually declared the victor was already decided. Bewildered, he demanded answers, but she simply tapped her sharp fangs. The chilling truth struck him. She had assimilated his entire bloodline's power. Ignoring his internal panic, she began smothering the mythical Fenrir with affection. He desperately warned her of its savage nature, causing the majestic beast to cower. Pouting over the retreat, she wished the legendary wolf stayed longer. Intrigued, he wondered if she possessed a natural affinity for magical creatures. She shrugged, admitting she merely inherited her careless sister's discarded pets. Pivoting sharply, Takafuji announced their immediate departure. Their prime objective? Infiltrate a neighboring kingdom for crucial intelligence, preferably a sanctuary, untouched by any summoned champions. Her harsh laughter shattered his optimism. She bluntly revealed a grim reality. Not a single territory remained untainted by these otherworldly warriors. Sensing his profound confusion, she exposed the existence of the Grand Alliance of 32 heroes. Each nation faced strict summoning quotas. The sheer scale felt absolutely absurd. What threat required an army of saviors? This spelled catastrophic news. A massive legion of overpowered enemies could already be tracking his every move. That included the golden-haired warrior who vanished mid-battle, and the endlessly infuriating Ryu, alongside his elusive faction. A deadly confrontation with them was destined and inevitable. The narrative then abruptly shifts, revealing dark murmurs echoing through the void. Beastmen, sorcerers, elves, draconic hybrids, and mere mortals. A sinister voice demanded, their flesh as sacrifices for a cursed resurrection. A monstrous eye materialized. A twisted claw manifested. The legendary demon sovereign was awakening. This apocalyptic entity was exactly why 32 champions were called forth. Lord Ignoya, the ultimate harbinger of despair, had officially returned. Meanwhile, shifting back to our duo, they casually strolled through a bustling metropolis. Amidst the chaotic crowd, a grateful elder abruptly hailed her. He warmly offered freshly baked bread, repaying a past heroic deed. Though momentarily perplexed, she found her arms overflowing with local gifts. The entire district affectionately cheered for Eri, the clever alias, shielding her true, dangerous identity. Weeks had passed since she and Takafuji infiltrated the grand holy city of Reagan, a towering fortress of monolithic architecture and divine law. Naturally, the central church wielded terrifying, absolute authority here. Fortunately, a thriving mercenary guild operated within its walls, offering the perfect cover for generating much-needed funds. Lenore, adopting the stealthy moniker Kiri, constantly shouldered the exhausting burden of securing their daily rations and supplies, while her lazy partner practically hibernated. But announcing her return, chaos erupted. A brutal impact launched him straight through their front door, smashing violently into stone. Though his dramatic wailing suggested he'd survive the savage blow. A suffocating aura of pure intimidation flooded the street. The fierce female assailant coldly praised his refusal to black out from her devastating strike. It defied logic for such a shameless playboy to possess incredible physical durability. Despite her absolute fury, a twisted fondness burned in her gaze, and her actual, terrifying identity? Fanatic Loss. Yes, that insanely aggressive title was her literal birth name, determined to purify his soul. She forcefully seizes his jaw, leaving Takafuji utterly bewildered. Meanwhile, Aaliyah, standing on the sidelines, watches the unfolding madness with utter bewilderment. Clearly, this sudden physical intimacy sparks a fierce, uncontrollable blaze of jealousy within her heart. Thus, her chaotic new destiny in this foreign land commences. Shifting back to Takafuji's daily routine, our protagonist has been practically living at the guild tavern. Seriously, what is his ultimate master plan? Did he slaughter a horde and decide to simply relax? I suppose even warriors need their rest. However, the frustrated tavern keeper keeps demanding his mounting coin debt, yet he shamelessly tosses it onto his tab. His backup plan? Simply draining Aaliyah's hard-earned treasury. While our main character spirals into a hopeless tavern drunkard, Aaliyah relentlessly conquers brutal missions, claiming the legendary moniker of the Black Rose. Awestruck mercenaries bestowed this fearsome title upon witnessing her annihilate endless monster waves, elegantly spinning her crimson gown. Meanwhile, Takafuji shamelessly absorbs the luxury, blissfully relaxing as she harvests mountains of gold. The entire Adventurer Guild remains completely baffled as to why the magnificent Black Rose shadows such a lazy freeloader. Eventually, a bold mercenary challenges his lack of ambition. Mockingly, the man claims that leeching off a maiden's wealth destroys his warrior pride. Unbothered, Takafuji coldly commands the fool to step back. Suddenly, he observes that the solitary drinker from the shadowy corner is inching ever closer. Gulping down venomous ale to maximize his toxic immunity, Takafuji secretly analyzes the hidden mechanics of this chaotic city. Unfortunately, his excessive alcohol consumption has transformed him into a total social outcast. Without warning, the tavern chimes echo, revealing the arrival of that zealous fanatic, bearing an unusual, holy title. Takafuji questions why a pure cleric would taint herself in this den of sin. Naturally, the shameless rogue immediately offers her a brimming goblet of ale. Yet, she strictly preaches that heavy intoxication corrupts both flesh and spirit. She sternly advocates that absolute moderation is the only righteous path. Ignoring her sermon, his gaze intensely locks onto her mysterious forehead crest, boldly complaining about his blurry vision while demanding she step closer. Heavens, the ensuing chaos was a total blur. Did she willingly approach? Or did he violently lunge forward? It seems his reckless hands grasped empty air as she flawlessly evaded, warning him against touching sacred marks. In that exact heart-stopping second, Aaliyah dramatically breached the tavern doors, only to witness her companion brutally smashed into the bloody floorboards. Her eyes lock onto the deranged priestess, violently crushing his skull, utterly stunned by his monstrous endurance. Meanwhile, the ruthless tavern patrons roar with mocking laughter, declaring the shameless drunkard completely earned this vicious beatdown for his parasitic lifestyle. At long last, divine retribution had descended to shatter his arrogant laziness. Fanatique coldly confirms this is her righteous mission. Her absolute deity offers zero salvation. With blazing fanaticism, she dramatically vows that under the glorious banner of her goddess, she is dragging this sinner away. Suddenly, her terrifying gaze meets the glaring black rose, questioning if this lethal beauty requires assistance. The flustered Aaliyah, drowning in overwhelming embarrassment, stammers a weak denial. Wait, is she genuinely abandoning our protagonist? Absolute disaster. Actually, a fierce curiosity drives her to uncover this crazed woman's true intentions with her comrade. Stop jumping to conclusions. The priestess boldly claims the crazed, insolent fool attempted seduction. Honestly, his monstrous physical vitality is utterly awe-inspiring. Thank the heavens she mercifully salvaged his doomed soul. And with that, permanent farewell. The silent tavern watches in utter bewilderment, their eyes piercing Aaliyah, anticipating her next dramatic move. A few bold mercenaries even congratulate her for permanently discarding that parasitic burden. Yet, in a sudden heartbeat, she violently slams her coin pouch down, commanding everyone to freeze. Her delicate cheeks erupt into a blazing crimson flush as she desperately sprints after her companion. The stunned crowd practically collapses, completely mind-boggled over her obsession with such an eccentric outcast. Transitioning to a shadowy alleyway, the zealous fanatique violently hurls our unfortunate hero onto a stone bench, raising her massively glowing palm toward his battered skull. Surging with divine power, she readies a radiant miracle, whispering false mercies about holding back. This terrifying maiden shows absolutely zero respect for our resilient protagonist. Truly devastating. However, that menacing palm merely unleashed a soothing, restorative aura. As Takafuji groans in agony, she coldly questions his recovery, strictly commanding him to abandon his toxic drinking habits. Groaning, he demands her true identity, perfectly paving the way for her grand and wonderfully eccentric theatrical introduction. She is Fanatique the Holy Templar, though fauna suffices. Yet, her absolute unyielding demand is that they immediately perform a sacred ritual of devotion. Simultaneously, a stealthy Aaliyah stalks from the shadows, suffocating from intense jealousy over their intertwined fingers. Seriously, what madness is unfolding here? Are such intimate displays normal in this bizarre realm? Suddenly, a mysterious voice warns that the zealous priestess is overwhelmingly lethal. It is Feener, materializing beside her. He casually notes that while his master might be oblivious, his sharp instincts detected a terrifyingly powerful, divine aura radiating from the Templar. Aaliyah blinks in total confusion, and Fenner delivers a playful wink. He remains certain she already sensed the danger. Therefore, she must relentlessly track the boy. Deep inside the majestic cathedral, Fauna commands Takafuji to embrace this spiritual tranquility. It is a rare blessing to stand within such a holy sanctuary. She gracefully requests his identity, prompting his smooth lie, claiming to be Kiri. Gazing at the towering, divine monuments, he questions their profound meaning. She softly reveals it represents the supreme goddess. Smiling, she instructs him to directly mirror her sacred movements during communion. First, interlock 5 fingers to perfectly symbolize the supreme goddess. Next, weave the remaining 4, close your eyes tightly, and channel your devotion. Now, he is simply playing along with the charade. Utterly clueless about how his destiny dragged him here, he decides to embrace this chaotic ride, while wrapped up in this. He suddenly realizes his soul has never offered a genuine prayer in his entire existence. But as he finally bows, an unseen cosmic entity locks onto his presence. Fran flinches, completely caught off guard. Suddenly, an overwhelming aura pierces his soul, binding him with an invisible tether. Could this be Fran casting a spell? No. His razor-sharp instincts scream otherwise. This chilling sensation defies all logic. It is neither ordinary mana nor a worldly physical attack. An unknown existence is peering directly into his very core. Pure annoyance flares within him as he mentally roars, demanding the identity of this unseen trespasser. He fiercely warns the shadow to immediately back out of his mind. Instantly, the oppressive link shatters. Fanatique softly remarks that his prayers held a blazing devotion she never truly anticipated. She assumes divine grace has moved him. With his spirit cleansed, the next brutal phase of training begins. Takafuji, however, remains fixated on the grinning idol. What is this terrifying cosmic energy? He silently vows to return and unravel the twisted secret hidden within this sanctuary. Meanwhile, in an ethereal realm, two mysterious women converse. The silver-haired figure confirms the severed link. Her blue-haired companion scoffs in sheer disbelief. A mere mortal breaking. Their divine hold? Absolutely impossible. Deep within the lurking shadows, the Garden Host Squad finally uncovers Takafuji's true identity, revealing who Kiri actually is. The tavern bell chimes. Our main character returns to the bar. The lone bearded man remains, exuding an aura uncannily identical to the legendary Demon King, a flawless 10 out of 10 resemblance. He smirks and points out that our hero is looking terribly rough. Wait, how did Takafuji suffer such heavy damage? Ah, the fanatic Templar absolutely destroyed him under the burning daylight. Just wait until the sun falls, woman. The shadows will grant him true power. He curses, this unhinged so-called Templar internally. She had ambushed him without a single ounce of hesitation or mercy. To make matters worse, her strikes carry lethal devastation. Since he harbors vampire blood, her blinding light magic inflicts agonizing, soul-burning damage. She casually mentions sensing his monstrous perception back at the tavern. It is a tragedy that his physical vessel lags behind those sharp instincts. Her terrifying intuition catches him off guard. Unfazed, she relentlessly continues her brutal assault, claiming pain brings perfection. As he desperately pleads for mercy, Aya observes from a safe distance. She winces at the sheer brutality of the scene. Should they intervene to save him? At this violent pace, his body will be reduced to dust. However, Fenyu sternly interjects. Takafuji specifically ordered them to stand down unless a life-threatening crisis truly erupted. Furthermore, Fenyu knows the crafty rogue could easily slip away. He clearly harbors a hidden agenda they cannot yet comprehend. Ultimately, his secret condition is met. The grand escape begins. Returning to the tavern, the bearded veteran nods. Surviving that bloodthirsty maniac is no small feat. Yet, in this brutal realm, Templars slaughter mercilessly, as holy sacrifices to their supreme deity. They possess terrifyingly potent divine relics, but their most catastrophic threat lies within their cunning, ruthless battle tactics. He sternly warns Takafuji to sever ties and abandon any reckless thoughts of mimicking their holy path. The dark elements reject him. Takafuji sighs in agreement, painfully aware that their divine methods clash with his cursed nature. Yet, a burning question remains. How does this stranger know his limitations with magical relics? Suddenly, the tavern doors blast open. Fanatique returns like a relentless storm. Praising his fleeing skills, she demands he resume his hellish torture. Fleeing straight back to the initial capture zone, our protagonist truly made a spectacularly foolish tactical blunder. The bearded watcher observes them with deep amusement. He knew the boy harbored impure desires, but enduring lethal beatings just to stay near her? That is a terrifying level of dedication. Internally, Takafuji frantically racks his brain, desperately searching for a countermeasure to defeat her blinding holy magic. At this brutal pace, his ashes would scatter before he found an answer. Left with zero options, he plays his ultimate trump card. He boldly proposes a return to the holy sanctuary for another session of deep devotion. Unsurprisingly, her eyes sparkle with blinding zeal. Overjoyed, she marvels at his sudden thirst to worship the supreme deity. She believes his corrupted soul is purifying. In reality, he is merely dodging her fatal training regime to investigate that horrifying cosmic anomaly. Upon crossing the chapel gates, a sudden realization strikes him like cold steel. The suffocating presence from beyond has completely vanished. A chilling theory emerges. Could the master and these blind believers be tethered to a totally different entity? And honestly, why is he labeling this lunatic as his master? Suddenly, his ultimate tracking skill hits a wall. This invisible force must originate from a higher dimension. Just like his own otherworldly powers, this divine surveillance is completely alien. He unleashes his absolute analysis skill, scanning every inch of the sanctuary. It bypasses the idol, the cultists, and their holy garments. Finally, his system locks onto an abnormal foreign substance. His gaze sharpens fiercely, realizing the hunt is over. A pulsating, bizarre relic stone serves as the dimensional bridge to this supposed supreme deity. This unholy artifact was the exact anchor invading his mind and binding his soul to the abyss. Yet, he knows this artifact was the exact anchor invading his mind. His mind flashes back to that radiant blonde deity. This imposter? Not even close. Did he just declare war on the true divines of this realm? He buries that dangerous thought. Suddenly, Fanatique's face flushes a deep, startled crimson. A towering presence emerges from the shadows. Enter Lord Raven, the undisputed champion of the capital and supreme commander of the Holy Knights. Decades passed. He single-handedly crushed a monstrous invasion, ascending to the status of a living, breathing demigod. Takafuji remains completely unfazed, viewing him as just another pompous boss. Without warning, the flustered knight waves a quick farewell, promising to meet up at the tavern tonight. Just like that, our boy is utterly ditched. Figuring this so-called legend couldn't possibly eclipse his own strength, Takafuji triggers his appraisal skill. But the instant the magical scan connects, the captain snaps. His gaze backward, Takafuji throws himself into the shadows, heart pounding. Did the hero detect his divine eyes? He absolutely sensed the intrusion. The stakes just skyrocketed. His companions rush over in a panic, but he smoothly deflects, muttering about a foul stench in the air. Wait, was that the unmistakable aura of an otherworldly soul? Could this living legend be another summoned champion? That changes everything. Fast forward, the training grounds are being absolutely obliterated. Yet Aaliyah sits on the sidelines, practically dying of sheer boredom while watching their brutal clash. Takafuji and Fanatique have been trading blows from dawn to dusk, shrouded in dead silence. The total lack of drama is killing her. The Holy Knight swings her massive hammer with crushing force, praising him for finally mastering the art of evasion. He mutters a cautious thanks, unsure if he should drop his guard. Ever since his deadly clash with Ayana, the terrifying might of magical relics has haunted him. But Fanatique demands more, challenging him to break his endless defensive streak. His mind races, flashing back to his own lethal, shadowy blades. But activating them means unleashing his forbidden, abyssal magic, so he swallows his pride and declines. A fierce grin spreads across her face as she unleashes another earth-shattering smash, declaring the matter resolved. Tomorrow at dawn, he is hunting for a blade. A warrior cannot roam barehanded. Besides, her entire day belongs to Lord Raven, so their brutal sessions are paused. Takafuji tilts his head. Is this battle-hardened fanatic secretly harboring feelings for that captain? As night falls, he approaches a surprisingly gloomy Aaliyah. With a smirk, he questions if she finally uncovered his fatal weakness. She had analyzed his every move all day, but she simply sighs, brushing him off with an absent-minded shrug. He chuckles at the absurdity. Both she and Ferrer scrutinized his every technique, yet failed to expose a single flaw in his armor. Lost in her own world, she barely reacts to his teasing. Finally, she breaks the silence, asking what he wants. He casually drops the question, is her schedule clear tomorrow? His strict master, yes, the very same Holy Knight he manipulates to master radiant magic, despite his dark bloodline, practically ordered him to arm himself. Though he despises the light, he desperately needs steel. So, he recruits the fiery Aaliyah as his personal guide. The sprawling labyrinth of city markets is a mystery to him, but it is her absolute playground. Instantly, her gloomy aura shatters. She declares her total availability, tossing her pending guild quest straight into the abyss. Let us be real, Takafuji is completely lost without her street smarts. She snatches his arm, dragging him toward an epic shopping spree. He watches her glowing enthusiasm, a rare warmth blooming in his chest. Unbelievably, this chaotic little troublemaker is actually melting his icy heart. A truly top-tier female lead. Strolling through the bustling, magic-lit streets, they banter endlessly about local delicacies, but his mind remains locked on acquiring a lethal blade. Her cheeks flush pink, struggling to hide her romantic disappointment as she secretly treated this like a fated date. Shaking it off, she barks at him to pick up the pace, leading the charge into an armory. At first glance, the racks are filled with absolute trash, but Takafuji, ever the cunning trickster, unleashes his omniscient appraisal to pierce through the rust. Hidden amongst the garbage lie genuine, master-crafted treasures. The devastating reality, however, is that these legendary armaments run entirely on mana, a mystical energy his vampiric body completely lacks. Breaking his deep concentration, his companion excitedly unveils a massive, bone-chilling Grim Reaper scythe. She squeals about its terrifyingly cute aesthetic and zero magic requirement, but he instantly rejects the monstrous gear. The vampire lord is practically flexing his unmatched swagger now. She silently agrees, mesmerized by his dark, mysterious aura. Flipping the script, he orders her to upgrade her own arsenal. That flashy Eastern katana of hers screams danger to every passing guard. Realizing his tactical brilliance, she agrees. A concealed, deadly weapon fits the shadows perfectly. With the instincts of a true assassin, she locks onto her ultimate prize in mere seconds. But before her fingers even graze the hilt, Takafuji intercepts, demanding to inspect the blade's hidden stats. A pure mithril dagger. It is the exact wholly aligned metal that makes his dark blood boil. But as a flawless magical catalyst, it is an absolute masterpiece for her combat style. Panic sets in as she spots the exorbitant price tag, but he casually waves off her financial dread. People forget this immortal vampire rules the midnight shadows, hunting monsters for massive bounties while posing as a daytime drunk. Trembling with anxiety over the immense cost, she hesitates, but he smirks. His only real expense is alcohol, so he completely sponsors her upgrade. Blushing violently, her head tilts adorably. The merchant bows deeply, sealing the legendary transaction. As Takafuji, what a tragedy. He found absolutely zero for himself. Yet her racing heart begged the question, did this oblivious boy grasp what that sacred blade signified? He just blinked, utterly lost. What are you babbling about? Meanwhile, her cheeks burned crimson, hopelessly enchanted. The poor maiden was captivated. Resuming their hunt, they scoured the bustling metropolis, searching through merchant stalls and shadowy corners, yet still couldn't uncover a single worthy relic. That was, until destiny led them to a deeply ominous cavern, guarded by a remarkably stone-faced servant standing watch outside. The mysterious elder ushered them into the shadows, leaving our two bewildered heroes frozen and entirely speechless. The stoic attendant revealed this hidden forge crafted strictly bespoke armaments. They merely needed to speak their wildest desires, and the legendary armament would be forged to utter perfection. Takafuji immediately questioned if they could forge a masterpiece entirely devoid of magical properties. The ancient servant promised that was absolute child's play. They would pour their very souls into surpassing every single expectation. Naturally, our cunning hero activated his hidden appraisal technique. Instantly, he realized the materials here radiated an overwhelming divine-tier aura. So, his curiosity blazed to forge a mighty contract. The elder smirked with deep anticipation, beckoning him deeper inside to examine the legendary treasures and endless possibilities. Takafuji cautiously asked if his maiden companion could follow, which the elder graciously permitted without hesitation. Stepping into the sacred forge, our hero audaciously criticized their hygiene, whining loudly about the sprawling, ancient cobwebs everywhere. The elder calmly likened the sanctuary to a forgotten relic, yet Takafuji continued his endless complaining while the exasperated attendant shoved him forward. Moments later, they emerged under the sun once more. He groaned about the agonizing delay, but Aaliyah warmly countered that their grand decision was incredibly swift. They completely bypassed the nightmare of visiting countless ordinary merchants. Out of nowhere, she joyfully praised the exquisite tea. He casually noted its familiar flavor, comparing the brew to the royal palace's finest. Perhaps the serene, enchanting ambiance elevated the taste. Or perhaps her beating heart simply yearned to sit peacefully, sharing a warm cup with him. Oh, we absolutely know her true romantic motives. Time drifted away before she curiously questioned his lightning-fast ultimate choice. He smirked, confessing his appraisal ability had scanned the servant, confirming every artifact inside possessed absolute god-tier supremacy. Moreover, that formidable guard had earned his total trust. He sensed a truly terrifying mastermind ruled that shadowy domain. The sole detail that shattered the grand illusion was the dungeon's filthy condition. Clearly, This legendary smith possessed 0 sense for basic modern business. And heavens, above, a familiar nightmare returned. Fanatique shattered their peace, crashing the romantic scene like an utter storm. She ruthlessly ambushed our exhausted hero, ruining his desperately needed tranquil tea time. He sighed, questioning why his chaotic master was lurking around. Hadn't she planned a romantic rendezvous? She barked that her boring outing ended, instantly accusing him of secretly seducing innocent maidens in the bustling streets. Flustered, Aaliyah frantically screamed in denial, swearing their bond was strictly platonic. Suddenly, a mysterious masked figure ordered the unhinged Fanatique to cease her wild rampages. Blushing, she bowed in shame, realizing she had completely failed to uphold the divine, graceful image of her worshipped deity. The masked phantom formally declared his identity as Mask. He revealed his grim duty as the Holy Church's assigned watchdog for the chaotic priestess. Takafuji's instincts flared, questioning the dark reason behind this heavy surveillance. She sighed, admitting the Holy Order possessed an agonizingly strict, unyielding ironclad doctrine. They're actively interrogating her ties with Takafuji. Mask coldly interjected, stating that all divine sisters must forever preserve their sacred absolute purity. Thus, our hero was branded a highly dangerous corrupter. He scoffed at the sheer absurdity, given he already escorted a breathtakingly gorgeous rogue like the legendary Black Rose, yet was bizarrely accused of targeting a crazed fanatic. Scandalous whispers of their forbidden romance were infecting the entire kingdom. Takafuji simply shrugged off the baseless, wild slander. However, Mask dramatically shifted the tension, confessing his incredibly deep, burning fascination regarding the man who conquered the mighty Black Rose. Whipping out a passionate letter, Mask shockingly revealed his identity as the supreme leader of her devoted followers. Desperate, the masked fanatic begged our hero to impart his legendary seduction techniques. Good heavens. Takafuji aggressively smashed his exhausted face into the cold wood as Mask officially swore undying loyalty to his new master. Hours passed, yet this pathetic disciple remained stubbornly glued to him, begging for romantic wisdom, while the two beautiful heroines gossiped nearby. Suddenly, Fanatique's eyes narrowed, aggressively interrogating if the incredibly awe-inspiring rumors binding the invincible Black Rose to this fool were absolute reality. Aaliyah proudly confirmed it. Fanatique's sharp gaze drifted, suddenly locking onto the sparkling mithril blade, demanding an immediate explanation. Her intensely nosy attitude basically screamed, "Woman, stay in your lane." That was the fierce rejection Aaliyah desperately wished to unleash. Yet Fanatique seemed utterly bewildered. Apparently, in this magical realm, gifting pure mithril symbolizes an eternal vow of marriage. Absolute insanity. How did a weapon seal a lover's destiny? The endlessly obnoxious priestess, connecting the dots, cackled that if the clueless boy had knowingly proposed with that legendary steel, the sheer comedy of it would be spectacular. Yet she highly doubted his romantic intelligence. Swiftly slicing through the tension, she abruptly declared their dramatic interrogation finished, vowing to corner Aaliyah for deep secrets another time. Meanwhile, the fierce rogue sat paralyzed, forcing a terrifyingly sweet, plastic smile, calmly replying, "Absolutely, looking forward to it." Deep down, this entire interrogation was pure psychological torture. The unholy audacity of this fanatic bothering his destined queen was sparking pure alleyway ambush fantasies. Zero hesitation. Takafuji's very soul felt shattered after surviving this maddening day. Meanwhile, the masked disciple sunk deep. His mind lingered on Kiri. Though skilled at reading auras, this girl remained a total enigma he simply could not decode. What kind of soul was she hiding? Later, Fanatique waved our protagonist goodbye, cheerfully declaring her day was absolute perfection. She promised they would reunite soon. He grumbled about her overwhelming energy. Retreating home, he craved nothing but pure, uninterrupted slumber. But his nocturnal existence was just awakening, the vampire curse. Without warning, a chilling sensation crawled up his spine, shifting everything entirely. He froze outside his threshold as an eerie whisper questioned his sharp instincts. His legendary sixth sense remained absolutely flawless. The haunting voice echoed inside his skull, sending shivers deep into his soul. Yet, he fearlessly entered, confronting an unexpected shadow. A mysterious beauty awaited, offering a deceptively polite greeting. She mockingly introduced herself as fools. Takuji maintained his icy composure. Unfazed, he demanded if she was the invading phantom. She smirked, fascinated that he could detect her hidden, looming presence effortlessly. Yet he remained totally ignorant of spiritual sorcery. Good heavens, parading around in such scandalous attire. Madam, please show some modesty. What exactly was she wearing? This dangerous duo tested our limits. She confessed rumors of his dark legacy sparked her undeniable curiosity. She wanted to judge his wretched nature. Surprisingly, she offered to become his master in spiritual arts. Talk about absolute madness. Instantly, she seized his wrist, whispering a seductive command. She dragged him close. What on earth? I envy our dark hero. Watching him get helplessly reeled in was torture. The temptress mocked him for letting an unknown enemy drag him into bed effortlessly. His unapologetic response? You are gorgeous. He lived by one predator rule. When a grand banquet appeared, he consumed it entirely. Well then. Suddenly, her magical interference flared beautifully. For a fleeting second, it truly seemed destined for absolute passion. But fate had darker intentions. He mistakenly believed their sheer proximity guaranteed her hypnotic enchantment would succeed without a single flaw. Yet, she gazed into his eyes, formed a playful heart, and murmured, sadly, not tonight. Despite rejection, she pressed a cursed kiss. Boom. Absolute darkness claimed him, violently banished into an unknown dimension. This was definitely not the passionate climax anyone anticipated. Awakening deeply confused, he demanded answers. With supreme arrogance, she revealed they were utterly trapped within her absolute mental domain, a psychological realm buried inside every soul, where her power terrifyingly expanded. Spectral vines erupted as she declared her absolute sovereignty. In this nightmarish void, she possessed godlike authority. He was powerless. With a thought, she could effortlessly strip his mystical defenses away, bearing his spirit completely. She chuckled wickedly, stating, things get exceedingly dark here. Her ultimate master plan? Total mental destruction, driving him insane, but beautifully. She desired his eternal spirit to crave her existence alone. She aimed for absolute psychological conquest, total subjugation. Takafuji violently fought back, battling overwhelming pressure. She tauntingly exposed his purity, mockingly highlighting his complete lack of experience. She ruthlessly questioned why a lord possessing beautiful servants remained untouched. Was the great master secretly terrified of true vulnerability? Instantly, his blood-chilling dark aura erupted. He commanded her to silence her venomous tongue. Fear was utterly irrelevant in his realm. Without warning, a colossal demonic array blazed behind her. The absolute sanctuary she thought she commanded instantly shattered into pieces. Absolute devastation. Spectral flora withered as a terrifying claw lunged forward. Takafuji unleashed his demonic majesty, roaring for her utter silence, silencing her arrogant blabbering completely, just to avoid getting mercilessly consumed. The magnificent tyrant then ruthlessly mocked her supposed godhood. Absolute authority. How pathetic. Because when the true game of total domination began, he was the undisputed master of darkness. Meanwhile, Aaliyah approached his chamber and boldly stepped inside. She scolded him for leaving defenses down, only to witness absolute shock. She stumbled into a terrifying nightmare. The invader wept dark agony, while Takafuji casually glanced over with an icy, "Welcome back." I assumed our loyal heroine would retreat, but no. She unsheathed her legendary mithril blade. Heavens above, protect us all. Meanwhile, the defeated sorceress, dignity barely restored, collapsed in utter disgrace. Wait, what on earth? Was that thing seriously inside him? He furiously spat the anomaly out. The terrifying truth dawned. That was her genuine form. She absorbed an illusionary avatar. Her true existence was practically microscopic. This cunning creature relied on forbidden enchantments to bewitch mortals and steal their darkest secrets. A wicked interrogator. Honestly, I would have fallen completely. Her identity was Sophie, an ancient, elite spirit of the Tempest Winds. Tragically, she had fallen under Lee Nori's absolute tyranny. She confessed her fate to Aaliyah, whose eyes sparkled with overwhelming adoration. Finding the tiny spirit unbearably cute, Takafuji demanded if this divine overlord was the exact entity who contacted him previously. Her terrified silence provided absolute confirmation. The grand wheels of destiny were spinning far faster than his darkest calculations predicted, deploying such devastating traps already. His aura flared ominously as he ordered her to spill every single cosmic secret she harbored. Otherwise, her ultimate fate meant unimaginable agony. The fragile entity quivered in sheer terror, desperately mustering a spark of ancient pride. Defiantly declaring her noble lineage, she refused surrendering celestial knowledge. He smirked darkly, genuinely amused by her utterly foolish, suicidal bravery. Daring to challenge his absolute authority? Very well. He mercilessly flicked her tiny midsection. Wait, that vicious strike hit far lower. Pink glowing hearts violently erupted. Good heavens, Takafuji walked a dangerous path. The crimson-faced spirit screamed, demanding immediate cosmic justice. No one knew what that absolute chaos was. Brace yourself. Girl, shield your eyes from those manifesting hearts filling the air. Betty tosses her aside without hesitation. Total anime-level insanity unfolding. Moving forward, destiny leads them elsewhere. And it appears she guided our party into the dense, whispering forest for vital intel. Her ethereal powers require her to be physically anchored to specific domains to unleash her magic. Bizarrely, her shimmering locks faded to midnight black, likely triggered by the main character's absolute domination command. Takafuji is utterly fascinated. He never imagined his dark skill, bound only to mortal flesh, could shackle an astral spirit. Though lacking the overwhelming grip it has on Aaliyah, this phantom was still ensnared to his unbreakable will. When he demands to know where spirits lurk, she confesses they inhabit absolutely everything. There isn't a single corner devoid of them. A chilling realization strikes Takafuji. Blind to spectral energy, invisible eyes could be stalking him from the shadows. Desperate for an edge, he commands her to reveal them. Unsure but willing, she focuses her energy. With a playful wink, boom, the hidden realm is exposed. Aaliyah showers her with awestruck praise, while the spirit just smirks with absolute confidence. She might lack cataclysmic high-tier magic, but her utility skills are unmatched. For instance, she demonstrates that she can vanish into the void, utterly undetectable. Takafuji's eyes gleam, calculating the sheer tactical advantage. Suddenly, Sophie drops a massive revelation. His domination warped her very essence. Her pure wind magic has mutated into an ominous, pitch-black gale. Swirling more like abyssal smoke than air, Takafuji instantly recognizes the dark signature. He formulates a brilliant strategy. This power changes everything, he declares. The scene violently shifts to a devastated forest clearing, where jaws drop a colossal beast lies obliterated, ripped perfectly in twain. Whether it was Sophie's unleashed fury, or Takafuji who struck the lethal blow, their fusion of blackened gale and shadow magic is apocalyptic. The trembling spirit is left utterly speechless. She never fathomed her wind could reap such absolute carnage. Had that vile monstrosity not spawned from the demon realm, it would be erased from existence. Demanding answers, he questions this demon realm madness. She nervously explains, picture an abyss, swarming with unholy, bloodthirsty fiends. How wonderfully vague. Yet, the true chilling mystery remains. Why on earth did that abyssal terror manifest here? Such an infernal beast defies the natural order of these serene woods. The night-hunting king, Takafuji, completely agrees this presence, screams foul play. Aaliyah nervously asks if Sophie has witnessed the demon realm firsthand. She hasn't, but the forest spirits are wailing in absolute terror. Aaliyah shudders, agreeing that infernal beasts crossing over spontaneously is an incredibly unnatural phenomenon. Takafuji's mind races who orchestrated this demonic breach, and emerging from the shadows, brace yourselves, look who it is. That highly suspicious, red-bearded figure matching the dreaded Demon King's exact profile. But prepare for the ultimate cliffhanger, it turns out. Two identical masterminds are pulling the strings. Sometime later, Takafuji finally grasps his newly forged blade. And astonishingly, it looks completely unadorned. Aaliyah beams with excitement at its sleek simplicity. He nods in respect. The master-crafted steel feels like a lethal extension of his own arm. She casually drops that the legendary blacksmith is abandoning the city. A massive loss, given the sheer brilliance of his forged armaments. The stoic butler confirms it. Takafuji is his final patron here, yet he departs satisfied that the blade found a worthy master. Perhaps their destinies will cross again in distant lands. A dramatic farewell. That mysterious old craftsman is hiding profound secrets. Outside, Aaliyah gleefully celebrates scoring such a brutally expensive weapon without draining their own pockets, since it cost a fortune. Takafuji ruthlessly exploited Fanatic's limitless funds instead. Aaliyah wonders if he offered any gratitude. He coldly scoffs, not a chance in hell. She forced his hand into arming up. She foots the bill. And speaking of the devil, look who's gracefully kneeling in prayer over there. Absolutely unbelievable timing. Takafuji marches straight toward her. With a sharp gaze, she immediately begins analyzing his newly acquired steel. She praises its masterful, battle-ready craftsmanship, but he sharply interjects, reminding her that, as her piercing eyes surely detected, there isn't a drop of magic within it. His cursed vessel vehemently rejects arcane enchantments. She must carve this into her mind. No amount of grueling tutelage will force his stagnant strength to bloom. The elegant widow smiles gently, teasing if he's already broken by her relentless training. He scoffs without hesitation. He despises every second of this charade. Confronting harsh reality, he declares that continuing this farce is utterly illogical. They are merely burning precious time to ashes. He officially severs their master-student bond, claiming she's squandering her own life away. You'd expect crushing disappointment, but instead, she erupts into musical laughter, fully acknowledging the brutal truth. Even if he bled through centuries of training, his power would stagnate. That is exactly why she vows to shadow his every step, until he miraculously shatters his limits, because unwavering faith is her ultimate weapon. Did this unyielding woman just ignore rejection? Keep your distance from our lone wolf. He is already juggling that suspiciously young spirit girl and a hopelessly clingy companion. He grumbles beneath his breath about this impossibly stubborn woman, refusing to leave. Yet, moved by her insane devotion, a spark of resolve ignites. Perhaps he could push slightly harder. The next chapter opens inside a dimly lit tavern, where a shadowy patron intensely fixates on a golden-haired beauty. Remarking on her bizarrely elegant and flawlessly hydrated lips, he immediately targets another girl, analyzing her fierce warrior physique and declaring her innocence completely shattered. Takafuji chokes on his drink, coughing wildly, completely shocked that this masked freak possesses such terrifyingly sharp observation skills. Mask coldly chuckles, crediting the Holy Church. Surrounded by zealous devotion to absolute purity, he successfully awakened this highly invasive and disturbing appraisal talent. Now, our main character finds himself trapped at a tavern table with this absolute creep. Curiously enough, the masked man possesses a dangerously silver tongue. He weaves his words perfectly, almost tricking Takafuji into accidentally spilling several crucial secrets. Intense suspicion gnaws at his mind. What is this shadowy figure's true objective? Still, free food is fantastic, so he ignores it. Suddenly, Mask shifts his predatory gaze toward the tavern door. Another stunning figure enters. He instantly praises her devastating sway, claiming her overwhelming aura bleeds both majestic dignity and complete tragic despair simultaneously. She projects holy innocence, but her hidden energy is violently inappropriate. We refuse to repeat his filthy words. One glance at his wicked appraisal confirms every depraved suspicion. Takafuji ruthlessly smashes 2 wooden branches across Mask's skull. Seriously, stop verbally harassing the tavern's female. Page-eyed, I'd do you want us permanently exiled? The bruised idiot whines an apology while the girl flees. Takafuji aggressively demands answers. Why stalk him instead of guarding Fanatique? Mask coldly reveals that the sole reason he monitors the area is because Takafuji poses a massive threat. Furthermore, a ruthless holy trial is rapidly approaching. This exact battleground city will determine which elite priestesses survive the brutal initiation. Right now, Fanatique is marching toward absolute unmatched glory, or a completely devastating slaughter. These unforgiving divine tests demand blood. Naturally, the Holy Order is highly suspicious of Takafuji's sudden influence, since their fiercely dedicated saint has abandoned her strict training routine just to hover around his shadow. Is she truly powerful? Takafuji questions. Mask quickly confirms she is pushing through the final, agonizing breakthrough stages triumphantly. The tavern doors violently swing open. Enter the absolute ruler of alcohol, a hidden titan. Takafuji throws a careless, friendly greeting at the bearded veteran, demanding a simple favor. The old warrior immediately barks back, telling him to handle his own chaotic messes. They trade sharp, sarcastic insults, yet the elder clearly senses Takafuji's hidden, monstrous potential, while our clueless hero remains entirely blind. Mask abruptly stands, radiating pure disgust toward the newcomer, desperately plotting his escape. Takafuji simply orders him to deliver Fanatique a sincere apology. The bearded veteran aggressively warns the young protagonist to choose his shadowy allies carefully. Takafuji fiercely fires back, refusing lectures from a scruffy, forgotten outcast that the entire world casually ignores. He waves mask away. Suddenly, Sophie's trembling voice echoes from the pitch-black depths of Takafuji's shadow, terrified beyond belief. How can you endure his suffocating presence? A paralyzing, instinctual terror completely crushes the hidden spirit. She absolutely swears. The veteran can perfectly see her. The elder suddenly smirks and speaks up. That unseen companion is definitely a supreme, high-tier elemental spirit. Takafuji's blood runs ice-cold, realizing the man hides nothing. The elder gleefully declares this encounter an absolute stroke of fate. He fully exposes Takafuji's soul-seeing powers. Aaliyah stares in total confusion while Takafuji instantly triggers his divine appraisal. The horrifying truth strikes. Name Igno, Chimera Homunculus, Demonic Dragon Beast, Reincarnated Divine Curse Protection. An overwhelming tsunami of terrifying stats floods his brain. But one glowing, apocalyptic title shatters his reality. The current Demon Lord. Takafuji paralyzes. Cold sweat drenches his trembling spine. Aaliyah immediately senses the lethal tension suffocating the room, and without missing a beat, the ultimate villain suggests taking this outside. Away from the fragile tavern crowd, stepping into a quiet battleground, perfectly suited for Takafuji Leori. Wait! He casually dropped his true, hidden family name. A horrifying revelation. Aaliyah's fierce combat. Instincts flare wildly. Takafuji forces himself upright, accepting the lethal invitation smoothly. Aaliyah prepares to march into hell alongside him, but he barks an absolute command. Stay behind! The binding master-servant pact forcefully chains her to the floor, completely paralyzed. Deep inside the pitch-black woods, the demonic entity urges calm. He verifies the location, but Takafuji remains completely silent, intensely, gripping his weapon. The monstrous king chuckles, acknowledging the suffocating dread radiating from the boy in this terrifying scenario. Without any warning, he unleashes a catastrophic wave of aura. The immense pressure violently shreds the protective shadow spirit apart. The king declares, "No invisible spies are allowed in this domain." Poor Sophie instantaneously collapses, completely knocked unconscious. The terrifying demonic ruler smirks an apology, announcing that only 2 titans remain standing in the darkness. His chaotic form bleeds reality, mixing elven points, twisted demonic horns, and beastly animal traits into one horrifying nightmare. He demands to know exactly what races through Takafuji's mind upon seeing him. The answer is incredibly obvious. This creature is an absolute biological abomination, a chaotic, mutated disaster. Beneath a rugged beard, the Dark Overlord laughs, fully embracing the horrifying truth. He knows his monstrous appearance is completely revolting. He flaunts a beastly tail, a forged chimera homunculus. Once a completely ordinary demon fighting in the endless chaotic abyss, he sees this twisted vessel during his second reincarnation cycle. He suddenly declares Takafuji an otherworldly anomaly from beyond, which marked his second existence. Yet for the Sovereign of Darkness, this was incredibly his third reincarnation. Born originally as a pure-blooded fiend, he commanded absolute authority as the Supreme Overlord 2 eras prior. During his primordial lifespan, his overwhelming strength defied logic. Grasping whatever he desired, he mercilessly slaughtered whoever dared block his path. Seizing boundless treasures, countless maidens, and infinite influence, he openly mocked those seeking his downfall. After violently eradicating the rival factions, his insatiable bloodlust turned upon his own demonic brethren. I massacred the dwarf tribes, plundering their hordes. I reduced those arrogant elves' sacred woodlands to ashes. The beastmen and nomadic warriors were completely obliterated alongside them. Chuckling darkly, I thought, at last, true liberation, absolute joy. Or so he assumed. He relentlessly chased that fleeting illusion of triumph. Unsurprisingly, however, his grim saga lacked any joyful conclusion. He perished on his feet, battling eternally. Absolute savage. Takafuji questions, "Were you actually slain?" The elder smirks, "Never. No warrior possessed the might to defeat me, but mortal clocks expire. Once my timeline depleted, I awakened inside an endlessly blinding void. Suddenly, A mysterious child possessing snowy locks materialized right before my gaze. I initially assumed a cosmic justice had finally arrived. But nay, he encountered divinity. Takafuji observes him sharply, contemplating whether this was the identical celestial being he witnessed upon crossing into this realm. The ancient monarch notes she proclaimed herself the planetary ruler. In a mere heartbeat, Takafuji realizes they meant entirely different entities. His patron deity reigned supreme across infinite dimensions. Igno elaborates that per her absolute judgment, his atrocities went too far. Thus, his legendary memories, overwhelming mana, raw power, and combat genius were completely severed. Afterward, his ruined soul was cast into a realm famously dubbed the Forsaken Dimension. Takafuji's gaze sharpens dangerously. Demanding clarity on this location, the grizzled veteran delivers the brutal truth. Earth, your origin point, essentially purgatory. Exactly as branded, it remains a barren domain utterly ignored by heavenly beings. Stripped completely bare, he reincarnated within an incredibly mundane household, leading an utterly unremarkable existence, where magic never manifested. He poured his absolute soul into simply surviving, securing employment, chasing a meager paycheck, and bowing his head to dodge societal conflicts. He eventually wed a gentle lady who, he brutally admits, lacked any striking physical beauty. Man, what a savage burn. However, they brought forth a child. That son was undeniably radiant. Their household economy was constantly in shambles. Occasional explosive disputes shattered their peace, mirroring ordinary mortal clans. Yet, it pulsed with genuine authenticity. Wild. After ruling as the literal devil, this former tyrant spent his second chance playing a mundane salaryman. What a mind-bending shift. Surprisingly, though, that ordinary struggle brought him pure joy. Back when he commanded dark legions and seized infinite desires, he mistook conquests for satisfaction. Yet that tyrannical reign concluded without him ever grasping the true essence of genuine fulfillment. Consequently, he now vows to guide wandering souls toward their own paradise. Takafuji remains utterly baffled. Who exactly is this ancient monster referencing? Still, the elder simply states, I shall utilize this newly forged flesh to its absolute limits. Takafuji probes if this implies initiating a global massacre. The grizzled warrior slowly denies it, clarifying, that was never my intention. He emphasizes his current nature as an artificially stitched homunculus. Upon summoning, countless biological templates forged his physical vessel. Altogether, he represents a chaotic, forbidden fusion of 6 distinct lineages. Those exact same 6 factions ravaging this continent remain locked in endless warfare today. Takafuji stands frozen, visibly, shaken by the revelation. This grim lore firmly establishes the existence of 6 warring tribes, yet he voices his lingering doubt aloud. Can this ancient relic truly comprehend this modern era's brutal mechanics? The former sovereign answers with chilling calm. Naturally, he understands perfectly. He remains acutely conscious of the prejudice targeting him. The agonizing hostility becomes undeniable upon entering any tavern. This twisted reality was fundamentally engineered to systematically block species from achieving harmony. Perhaps Takafuji fails to fully grasp this despair. Originating from an earthly realm, enjoying diverse, racial coexistence. Truthfully, he likely comprehends the darkness entirely. Respect the main character's intellect. Regardless, our protagonist simply demands to uncover. What is your grand strategy for global salvation? The seasoned elder sparks his pipe, murmuring, I possess zero desire to obliterate this entire planet. Offer me your hand. This was hardly the epic crusade Takafuji anticipated. Now, sheer bewilderment sets in. Agno clarifies that initially, his own path remained clouded. However, encountering Takafuji completely shifted destiny's trajectory. Tensely, Takafuji questions whether rejecting this mysterious pact invites lethal retaliation or torture. Yet the old man reassures, negative. You remain completely unbound. Revealing my tragic past to you right now merely serves as advance compensation for your eventual alliance. Reality dictates that even if Takafuji actively refuses to join hands, simply surviving while Agno systematically wrecks the establishment, he unwittingly becomes an accomplice. Provided he escapes death's grasp, continues roaming the continent, shattering obstacles and dismantling corrupt lives, His mere presence aids the cause. The heavy, piercing glare targeting Takafuji carries immense weight, leaving the warrior utterly speechless. Eventually, he bites back, declaring it incredibly arrogant to unload such massive lore, while demanding blind loyalty in exchange. Honestly speaking, though, sacrificing his own life for another's grand scheme holds zero appeal anyway. Nevertheless, he asserts this payment for an alliance falls completely short. He demands greater compensation. Agno appears puzzled. Takafuji confesses he's felt total exhaustion since materializing in this unforgiving domain. It is high time somebody settled the tab. Hold on. Is Takafuji preparing to plunge into this impending annihilation? Meanwhile, back at the tavern, flashback sequence initiated. Aaliyah remained abandoned. She stood completely frozen, simply watching his back fade away. Now stranded within the shadowy woods, she sits entirely alone, tightly gripping her knees, totally failing to comprehend why he pushed her. Stay behind. The heavy silence betrayed Lee Nori's unprecedented anxiety. Hoping to ease his burden, she believed she could finally prove her worth. Yet he coldly rejected her. Drowning in a suffocating spiral of absolute despair, bloodthirsty wolves materialized from the shadows. However, make no mistake, Aaliyah remains a terrifying apex predator. Suddenly, an unexpected presence arrives on the battlefield. Fanatique. What brings her into this deadly domain? Before a single syllable escapes, Fanatique brutally crushes a beast into the earth. The surviving monsters flee in terror. Grateful, Aaliyah offers her thanks, but Fanatique coldly brushes it off before unleashing a harsh lecture. Are you completely insane? This is a monstrous abyss. Why surrender your life so carelessly? For the legendary Black Rose to lose focus, a heavy shadow must cloud her thoughts. Shaken, Aaliyah masks her turmoil, claiming ignorance. Yet Fanatique shatters the tension, declaring, a shocking revelation. You and Kiri share the exact same soul. Without warning, a vicious strike is launched. Narrowly evading, Aaliyah screams her confusion. Have you gone mad? A sinister smirk dances on Fanatique's lips, eager to test Kiri's infamous comrade. Sensing the gloomy aura surrounding Aaliyah, this violent sparring session was meant to ignite her spirit. Dancing away, Aaliyah demands a rational explanation. Relentless, the Mad Maiden continues her onslaught, praising those razor-sharp combat instincts. Amidst the clashing steel, a bizarre question slices through the air. As an innocent child, did you ever pray to heaven? Utterly bewildered, Aaliyah listens as Fanatique reveals her faithless past. Her devout mother worshipped endlessly, yet never forced those sacred vows onto her daughter. A brilliant psychological game from a wise woman. Tragically, all those desperate pleas fell upon deaf ears. A monstrous ambush slaughtered her beloved mother right before her very eyes. Trapped among grotesque horrors, awaiting her inevitable demise, her shattered soul surrendered. In that agonizing abyss, she finally clasped her trembling palms and poured her entire being into a single prayer. Her only wish was to join her mother in paradise. However, a divine entity descended, denying her the sweet release of death. Absolutely miraculous. Even now, the true identity of her mysterious savior remains shrouded in mystery, cementing her absolute faith. Driven by this profound miracle, she now fervently worships and tirelessly preaches the glory of her self-proclaimed goddess. Reminding Aaliyah of her irreplaceable bond with Kiri, Fanatique insists she must return as his ultimate shield. Destiny demands her unwavering presence beside him. Then suddenly, emotional dams violently burst. Aaliyah furiously screams her desperate desire to protect Kiri, only to receive a devastating blow straight to the jaw. Checking on her attacker, Aaliyah notes the terrifying impact of that strike. So intense that Fanatique instantly loses consciousness, merely craving a comforting lap to rest upon. Sighing deeply, the exhausted warrior admits her own burning frustration. The enigmatic Kiri remains an unsolvable puzzle. Believing Aaliyah's intimacy granted her deeper understanding, she hoped for answers. Confidently, the Black Rose assures her that with such God-given talents, the truth will eventually surface. Heartfelt gratitude is exchanged. Later, bathed in the haunting glow of the midnight moon, Aaliyah finds fleeting peace until a familiar shadow emerges. A sudden greeting makes her heart race. Comforting her trembling nerves, he explains his stealthy arrival through the dark abyss. Crucial secrets have finally been unearthed. Letting out a long breath, Aaliyah rejoices at his unharmed return. Noticing her relief, He playfully questions her anxiety. Blushing, she confesses the unbearable fear of losing him to the unforgiving forest, mocking such a pathetic tragedy. Moreover, even death wouldn't sever the tangled chains binding her fate to his. Despite her harsh words, a radiant smile betrays her true feelings. Catching his silent gaze, she questions his speechless wonder. Brushing it off, he demands her overflowing energy for a mysterious new ritual. Brace yourselves. The mad scientist strikes. Once more. Suspicious of his wicked grin, she demands the truth. His cryptic promise of an imminent revelation sparks intense curiosity. Escaping his terrifying trials for now, our gaze shifts to the corrupted sanctuary. An unholy presence lurks within the sacred walls. The infamous predator of purity strikes again. Mask confronts this vile demon, demanding his ultimate objective. The dark fiend craves news regarding the traitorous maiden who slipped through their fingers, undoubtedly hunting Aaliyah. Mask bows his head, swearing to recapture their lost prey, despite the overwhelming odds. Discarding a trembling priestess like trash, the monster orders immediate action. Drag that elusive target straight into the depths of hell. The upcoming dark ceremony demands an ocean of pure souls. To expand their sinister dominion, massive sacrifices are absolutely mandatory. Maintaining his icy facade, Mask blindly justifies this slaughter as divine will. However, this bloodthirsty instigator radiates an aura of pure, unadulterated nightmare fuel. Seeking refuge, Mask violently retreats to his chambers, collapsing in sheer exhaustion while whispering dangerous threats against those underestimating his iron will. The web of betrayal thickens, leaving us gasping for any shred of ultimate truth. Meanwhile, beneath the crimson moon, an ancient fortress awakens. Shadows writhe as a gathering of terrifying demonic lords materializes from the abyss. Their numbers swell endlessly. Whispers echo through the halls, demanding absolute chaos. This pathetic slaughter must evolve into a cataclysmic annihilation of the entire forest. Dawn breaks, unveiling a shocking tragedy. Aaliyah has supposedly been completely devoured. What exactly was Takafuji implying? A vampiric bite? A hidden ritual? It remains a mystery. She calmly notes that this is merely his true nature. Lethargic under the sun, constantly slumbering, Sophie realizes one crucial detail of her grand escape. The morning is her only window to flee. Suddenly, their journey halts at a monumental destination. A legendary, high-stakes, battlefield, a pastry shop, a sudden slice-of-life detour. Aaliyah stands completely stunned, discovering Sophie despises sweets. As an ethereal being unburdened by mortal hunger, mortal delicacies hold absolutely no appeal to her. Yet, witnessing Aaliyah's crushed expression, Sophie relents. With a weary sigh, she agrees to taste it, simply to mend her friend's heart. Surprisingly, it is delicious. A rare, peaceful moment before the storm. Soon after, Aaliyah's spirit blazes with fury. She vows to absolutely crush that man someday. His past salvation cannot excuse his suffocating dominance. Gratitude lingers, yet her pride refuses to submit. She endures his shadow, only until she claims supreme strength. Sophie listens, wholly unimpressed, casually remarking that their twisted dynamic is absurdly strange. Without warning, Fenrir materializes. He demands an urgent march toward the woods. Although, that title no longer applies. Absolute devastation has erased it entirely. The duo arrives, staring in absolute shock, trying to comprehend this overnight annihilation. The towering trees, the vibrant grass, the roaming beasts, utterly eradicated. Fenrir shudders, unable to fathom the monstrous entity capable of such apocalyptic erasure. Sophie gravely reveals the forest spirits were devoured too, a feat impossible for any mortal. Instantly, Aaliyah rockets into the heavens, declaring a scouting mission. She pierces the clouds, sweeping her gaze across the wasteland. Fenrir shouts upwards, asking updates. She reports the catastrophic scars point toward a singular path. By tracing the devastating impact zones, she can predict their deadly trajectory. However, the true priority is unmasking the nightmare orchestrating this horror. Sophie interrupts, sensing sheer terror from the distant spirits. She strongly advises a tactical retreat immediately. Aaliyah, defiant as ever, pushes forward, detecting a sinister aura radiating from the peaks. The nightmare reveals itself. Those abyssal worms, That deranged girl's horrifying centipede abominations, the 15-legged freaks, swarm the land, shredding the very earth and consuming existence. Aaliyah's eyes widen in recognition. These are the wine, inexact demons from her previous woodland encounter, except their numbers have exponentially multiplied. Sophie desperately pleads to hide within the shadows before detection. Analyzing their relentless march, Aaliyah uncovers their doomed destination. It targets an innocent farm she once protected, the city of Ryan, the exact location where Takafuji acquired his legendary blade. Wait a moment. The sudden departure of that master blacksmith. This reeks of dark, insider, espionage. Ryan has faced beastly assaults before, but always with a sacred prophecy, a divine quest, or a holy warning. This time, absolute silence, a total blindside. This impending doom completely bypasses the known universal system. Sophie questions if they must alert Takafuji immediately. Aaliyah fiercely agrees, commanding her to summon reinforcements and drag him to the battlefield. Fenrir volunteers for the retrieval, demanding her combat strategy. Aaliyah reflects on Takafuji's obsession with concealing his divine strength. Yet, he would never abandon a falling kingdom. Haunting memories of fallen allies ignite her resolve. She chooses warfare, dictated by her own rules. Fenrir growls a grim warning, sensing the catastrophic power of these encroaching horrors. Their aura is overwhelmingly fatal. Her odds are 0, but fear is dead. Erupting with absolute conviction, her blade sings as it clears the scabbard. Her weak past is dead. She is ready for war. A towering monstrosity locks onto her. Its venomous maw snaps wide, launching a deadly ambush. Yet, Aaliyah strikes faster. An incredible, proactive, lethal execution. Fenrir observes in absolute awe, realizing her sheer magical pressure was overflowing before the steel even left its sheath. Perhaps it was a stern critique instead? Her battle aura is blazing far too recklessly, a lethal beacon drawing the enemy vanguard directly toward her. Regardless, blood has been drawn. He respectfully praises her relentless drive. Despite her unpolished arts, he honors her burning will to shield the innocent. Confined to this fleeting state, his presence is tragically limited. Yet, while his spirit burns, he shall grant her ultimate strength. This sacred soil once sheltered him and his long-lost brethren. Suddenly, Fenrir erupts into a colossal, majestic beast. He casually notes she is witnessing his legendary true manifestation for the very first time. The ultimate duo charges into the fray. Aaliyah leads the vanguard, executing a flawless, devastating strike. Fenrir roars his approval, acknowledging her rising martial mastery. She smiles, valuing his divine reinforcement. Steel sings, abominations fall, a perfect slaughter, until they uncover an impossibly massive enemy legion. Still, Fenrir calculates that culling the horde now will critically minimize the impending regional catastrophe. Aaliyah catches the grim logic instantly, launching herself deeper into the bloodbath. Their relentless assault continues. Together, Sophie gazes in pure awe, completely caught off guard by their overwhelming combat prowess. Aaliyah unleashes absolutely everything. Storms of wind blades tear through the battlefield. She pours out all her magical reserves, but tragically, her desperate attacks simply shatter against their armor. Fenrir barks a harsh warning to save her stamina. These monstrous beasts possess absolute immunity to her elemental attributes. Then, the brutal reality check drops. He coldly reminds her of Ayana. That warrior wielded a sword with legendary perfection. Aaliyah desperately needs that flawless aura control. A devastating blow to her pride. She once reigned as royalty, but survival now demands the ruthless instincts of a veteran warlord. Yet, she remembers Fenrir stood beside Ayana, making him her ultimate mentor. Suddenly, a savage beast charges in. Aaliyah instantly calculates she must suppress her mana output and strike with deadly precision. Her blade finds its mark. Meanwhile, Fenrir massacres the incoming horde using pure, unadulterated brute force. But Aaliyah is fading fast. Her trembling hands reveal her absolute limits are approaching. Her spiritual energy is completely drying up. The crushing reality of her own weakness finally suffocates her. Fenrir desperately begs her to endure just a fraction longer, but a sudden shriek pierces the air. Wait, that is not agony. She sank, her teeth in. As a noble vampire, her bloodlust awakens. She feasts not for hunger, but to aggressively drain their life. Force directly! The bloody massacre rages on. Yet, a menacing presence observes from the shadows, utterly disgusted. That sinister maiden from earlier tightens her grip. Instantly, every mutated centipede locks its predatory gaze onto their exact coordinates. How dare they even threaten our beloved heroine? Wait, why am I suddenly defending her with such fierce loyalty? Fenrir suddenly detects a chilling, murderous intent. Sophie screams a desperate warning, but it is entirely too late. A monstrosity lunges, brutally tearing her arm away. Please, say she shares Takafuji and his regenerative abilities. She staggers backward, trembling as she stares at her severed limb. The sheer shock paralyzes her entirely. Then, a devastating tail strike launches her through the air. Fenrir bravely cushions her violent crash, but the nightmare continues. Another beast snaps its terrifying jaws. Sophie instantly summons a glowing magical barrier, perfectly blocking the deadly onslaught. Fenrir uses the blinding distraction to sink his fangs directly into the attacker and crush its skull. Absolutely savage. Aaliyah lapses, hovering near death's door. Fenrir glances back, desperately demanding she keep her eyes open. They must fall back immediately. Right now, Sophie recognizes the grim reality. Hesitation will guarantee her brutal demise. In that fading consciousness, Aaliyah suddenly hears her late sister, Amanda, echoing from the void. Bleeding out and slipping away, Aaliyah gazes at the phantom. The apparition mocks her, scoffing that she remains utterly pathetic as always. Powerless from the very start. Will she run away and choose her own survival once more? Amanda suffered a gruesome decapitation, yet her ghost grins maliciously. Fighting through the agony, Aaliyah rises, declaring that the real Amanda would never utter such cruel words. This twisted illusion is born entirely from her own lingering insecurities. Yet, she finds peace, knowing she could glimpse that beloved face one last time. She openly confesses her past self lacked the power to protect her. However, her resolve is completely reborn, and Amanda will witness her glorious awakening. Sophie stares in pure bewilderment. Did the bleeding vampire miraculously regenerate her severed limb, or is she fighting through catastrophic blood loss? Fenrir orders her onto his back immediately. They must break out before the swarm completely devours them. Yet, Aaliyah merely shifts her stance, and an invisible, catastrophic blade of wind instantly eviscerates the encroaching monster. Fenrir freezes in absolute shock as she commands them to flee. She intends to become the ultimate sacrifice to hold the line. Fenrir roars that her pride is foolish, because throwing her life away right now means absolutely nothing. At that exact second, the legendary main character arrives. His overwhelming aura silences the battlefield entirely, carrying an undeniable presence that demands absolute submission from all. He coldly states that a vampire and their blood are one. After graciously blessing her with his own vital essence, she should have protected it with her life. Tears well up, as she is completely consumed by relief at his heroic return. Yet, he offers zero comfort. He brutally criticizes her for letting panic cloud her judgment. She remained entirely blind to the hidden dangers lurking in her blind spots. He casually steps off a gigantic corpse, sinking his blade deep to execute it flawlessly. Fenrir howls, in absolute triumph. The true master has descended. Takafuji casually points out their unarmored joints. A competent warrior would have exploited that weakness and conserved their aura. Without hesitation, he retrieves her severed arm, commanding her to stop dropping body parts. The undisputed king of mending flawlessly binds the flesh back together, granting her a second chance. But his ruthless lecture is far from over. He sharply details her catastrophic failures. Her fatal error was clinging to a doomed city when escape was possible. Why shackle herself to such meaningless, sentimental attachments? Shivering on the absolute brink of death, Aaliyah whispers a desperate apology. She simply let her bleeding heart dictate her actions. He shatters her delusions instantly, declaring that slaughtering 1,000,000 beasts will never be enough to save that fallen ruin. An endless tide of monsters surfaces, and he promises the dark truth will reveal itself shortly. The hideous creatures burrow deep while that sinister manipulator orchestrates her dark magic. Suddenly, an abyssal hand erupts from the shadows. Yet, Takafuji instantly materializes behind her, whispering his terrifying realization. She is the true mastermind. As she glances back, Deadly, invisible threads have already ensnared her. She is trapped. Sophie blinks in total disbelief. Just a second ago, Leori was beside her. Now, he stands atop the distant peak, seemingly holding a prisoner captive. Leori narrows his piercing gaze, activating his divine appraisal. The system confirms her true identity. Chris Camassel. Her overwhelming stats reveal the dark truth. There is absolutely no mistaking it. This is the vile beast tamer manipulating the monstrous hordes. Every devastating city siege shared a suspiciously identical rhythm, perfectly timed for the Church of Raven to swoop in as fake saviors. This so-called hero, adored as a living saint. His corrupted sanctuary is deemed holy ground for female disciples. But the setup feels way too perfectly orchestrated. At long last, the mastermind orchestrating these bloodbaths is unmasked. Chris flashes a sinister, knowing smirk. Mocking his detective work, she teases that crucial pieces remain hidden. Takafuji boldly steps into the fray, declaring he possesses an exceptionally reliable spy inside. He vows to extract the rest right now. Unleashing his mystic hypnosis eye, her terrifying smile only widens. She boasts absolute mastery over runic circles too, effortlessly deflecting his gaze. Once again, his utterly useless, cursed ocular power completely backfires. It constantly lets him down. Without warning, a blindingly brilliant rune erupts underfoot, vomiting nightmarish abominations from the earth itself. To absolutely nobody's shock, his pathetic psychic assault bounces off. Chris erupts into manic laughter, promising that he is finally about to witness true despair. She is bound to that man's every dark command, and tragically, she foolishly sold her soul to aid